Hi, welcome back. This is Badfo Haku. I'm here with Pope DARPA. Say hi.
Hi.
And we're also here with the Danger Planet people again to bring you the Reser tier list this time. Ooh, spooky undead. Legitimately though, very spooky, very strong faction at the moment, and I think we're going to be seeing some high tier masters at this play.
For those of you listening at home, he's Longton, I'm Landon.
And yeah, let's get to it. All right. Let's just start with good old Jack Dahl, an oldie but a goodie. He's still fine. I think probably B. He does specific tar pit maps really well, but besides that, I think he's just outclassed now. For a good chunk of masters. Um, but yeah, he tar pits. I just slam him in B. I think I'd slam both of them in B honestly, but we'll get to that. I'll just slam him in B.
So I would say probably top of C actually for original Daw. And it's not because I think he's not strong. Like he obviously has the tar pit strength you talked about, but it's that unlike a lot of masters in the game, there are things you can do to Jack Daw that just completely shut him down. And more of those things exist than used to. And so he has a bunch of 90-10 matchups in both directions. I think more than most masters in Malifaux. And so it's not necessarily that he's gotten weaker, but that if you are able to understand what he's trying to do and counter it effectively, he goes down pretty easily. So that's I think that C would just be he's a little bit narrower just because it's easier now to do the things that he hates to see. Like, stuff like ping damage, AoE clearing conditions, things like that.
Man, Brian's gonna kill us, but I kind of agree with C here. But that's just my perspective as a Thunders player. Like I maybe see this master declared once in every 100 games, but he just kind of strikes me as a pub stomper rather than something that's actually like good. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of fair, I guess. I mean, drawing a lot of cards though is always, I don't know. I love it too much.
Mr. Pope, anything else to share with the?
No, I think that's the start and end of my thoughts on Daw. I don't see him enough, honestly.
Dang, dude. All right. Well, I am a proud Reser player. It's what I learned the game on, and I love these guys. And I actually own Daw. But honestly, I do kind of agree with what a lot of the folks here are saying. What I've found is that Daw has really hot and cold matchups, and he is kind of been the definition of a pub stomper for me in that against less experienced opponents or opponents that don't understand how Daw works, he can just get in there and do tons of damage, make them discard tons of cards. But against experienced opponents that understand how to either do ping damage or put on lasting conditions that can do damage over time, he can get shut down really quickly. And he plays kind of face up. Like I don't think I've ever had a single competitive game against Sam when I'm on Daw 1 and he's playing me. He just strangles me every time. And that changes basically immediately when I go away from DAW. So yeah, unfortunately, I'd say top of C, bottom of B for me.
Huh. Oh, sure. I'll let myself get overrated on the first one.
I'm either way. I'm like halfway. I'm like top of C, bottom of B, wherever you want to put them.
Yeah, I'm a little bit thinking like it's pretty hard to just make him go from like one of the, the better masters and resers to like objectively one of the worst, but I do actually think that that is probably what happened to him is there are just so many better masters, and as you guys said, like the new masters and new elements aren't exactly like it's not just that they're better, they also like quasi counter him.
Yeah, like ES is horrible for him.
Yeah,
Like
like
spell eaters wreck him. Cadmus in general wrecks him. Maxine is really
Calypso
good against
cannot
him.
get staggered.
Yeah,
You can't
just
stagger
tough.
Calypso.
Yeah, there's ES is pretty rough for Daw.
And I'll just remind you there is an existing faction you never declared Daw into called 10 Thunders.
Yeah, which yeah, fair. So yeah, I'm fine with C. He really has narrowed in use case a lot, um, which is kind of sad. And honestly, I'm pretty sure I'm ready to just clump the second version of him with them.
Now, I
I've
do want to
seen
point out one thing, I guess, before we move on from regular Daw, and that's that I think he still has like one faction you can play him into. It's like I think Arcanists are still like a reasonable drop for Daw.
What
Not
happens
that
if he
I'm-
encounters Mei Feng?
Yeah, I mean
Takes
that's
the L.
reasonable. But then you just play the second version, I think. But I guess that's
And
where we're
maybe.
at.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the second version a little bit more, just because people probably aren't used to him. Not much change. Like his terrifying went up, great, but I don't know. He's supposed to, the way I've seen people try to play him is that nice like hazardous terrain bubble, and now you don't have to worry as much because you actually have a realistic health pool. So keeping him alive is arguably maybe a little bit easier, or maybe it's harder because you can't do the whole change to one. But overall, I don't feel like I'm ever afraid if I see this guy, like at all.
So I actually think I would put DAW 2 in B or bottom of B. And the reason for that is the hazardous stuff is cute, but really where I think he excels is that he's like really insanely fast and mobile, which isn't really apparent when you look at his card, but his big thing, in my opinion, is the way he punishes people really hard for bubbling up. Like Guilt of the Many is a pretty rude trigger. And it has some of the issues that these type of attacks have, like shockwave type of attacks, where the opponent, because they're trying to pass TNs, has some control over what models fail and get injured. But the fact that you can hand out staggered with this crew relatively easily means that you can make it pretty pricey for them to pass that many tests. And Guilt of the Many can just do absurd damage if your opponent's bubbled up. And the fact that he can also kind of force people to bubble with last words is kind of neat. So I also like that he actually has a health pool and incorporeal rather than has Dawes one's weird ping thing, because that means that some of the stuff that just ruins Daw 1, like ping damage crews, doesn't really have that same strength against him. I do think that like it's kind of one trick. It's a pretty good trick, so maybe high C is reasonable, but definitely, I played into Daw 2. I actually played into him for the first time at Gen Con with someone who had just bought and put him together. That was and I've had games since then, but that was kind of an interesting game. I think he does stuff. So I'd say low B, but I could be talked into like the top of C.
There's no way a Reser could possibly be challenged because Resers just sniff glue and do what they want. But I feel like he could be an A or a B. Honestly, he does a lot of reasonable things, and all of the weaknesses that I feel like came from Jackdaw 1 aren't really present here. Like, I cannot stress how important it is that you don't have to pay a 2-stone tax taking like GST on this guy, unlike the first Daw, is important to me. Like, that was a big problem for me, at least with Jackdaw 1, is that, you couldn't take Whisper because GST was just stapled to the guy, right? And even with New Daw, you don't even need GST or Whisper like you do on a lot of other Reser Masters to really unlock them, because all of his TNs are so low, and he even draws you cards. Like, he's a very positive resource activation, I feel like. And he's also just really fast. Move 6 Incorporeal lets you score a lot of points. If you need to score him a lot of points, right? He kind of has a bonus action that gets him out of engagement if you can land an attack, right? And like you said, if your opponent like bubbles, you can really get some good punishing off, but like that requires your opponent to do things. But even still, like, he's very mobile and he kind of forces your opponent to play positions they might not want to play. And I just think that's pretty valuable. So I don't think I could place him below B tier.
So I mean, like, so my thought on him, I've run this guy 5 times now. I've played with Daw 2 now 5 times. I would put him middle of B, probably. He's not a bad master in my opinion. He's certainly not the best master in Resers by a long shot, because you're in a very, very competitive faction, basically. But his strengths are, in my opinion, what like a lot of you guys talked about, to be honest. The things he does really well are he punishes bubbles really, really aggressively. He plays very differently than Daw 1, so that if your opponent is expecting, a traditional Daw 1 game, and you come out of the gate with Daw 2, you come out of the gate with a demon pinball man, basically, and it's a totally different play experience. I know that I've had success with him specifically on breakthrough where I can like score breakthrough with him really easily in like a wedge deployment or something like a standard deployment, something like that, or even like a flank. It's pretty easy to score, especially because of what Sam talked about. It doesn't seem, or it seems rather innocuous initially, but the burst of speed trigger on his repressed aggression attack, the way that I've been playing him is I always stack him with with Whisper, which in my mind, because I'm coming from the comp REL Magic world, it's like a blue spell that I get to stack my deck at the beginning of every activation on my most important guy. So traditionally, the way I play him is I go really late with him. I try to push him up the board or get him up the board with like a ride with me from Dead Rider or like a couple chain gangs if I'm playing in Save Spirits. And then I try to set it up so I get off one really solid hit on an opponent, like a move, charge, punch. And I try to stack so at least I got like a 12 or a 13 for that hit so that I can give off that aura. And then I either burst of speed out of there or top of turn, I fight really hard for the top of turn. And then I just go pulse, 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 pulse and guarantee the trigger with Guilt of Many like as many times as I can and try to schmongle their whole crew. And I've one-turned crews that way. And it's epic. But yeah, that's my thoughts on him.
Yeah, I kind of get all that. It's just when I see him on the board, and even like the stuff I don't like about him is just all the TN stuff, and the unreliability of a crew for me is what I generally try to mark him all the ways down for, and why I just like I personally just like can't play crews like that. Because I really hate having to rely on certain duels failing or stuff like that I don't have much control on. Like, don't get me wrong, TN13 move is great, especially if you've already staggered them.
Yeah.
It is a pretty hard duel to pass for a lot of people, but I'm just, God, every time you don't actually have control over something happening, it just for me makes it so much harder to play around it.
No, I
It's
get
also
you.
why I get like so much more so blown out by like jokers, because it's just I'm very much one of those players who like strategically looks at something and it's like, I want to make sure that these 3 activations go off the way we want. I have the cards I can cheat for it if I have to. Blah blah blah. And the reason when I've seen Geld play is because, and why I marked him a little bit lower, is just it's a similar problem. It's just sometimes he just fails these duels and it's just not great. You're hitting for 2, 3, 4 and stoning or needing a mass to make it 3, 4, 5.
I think you're not wrong. I maybe for that reason he's like low B. I would be comfortable with him as low B.
All right, I'll put him in B. The problem I think is we haven't been seeing a lot of play with him because he, as we've talked, he is outclassed and he's kind of outclassed and outcast as well.
Yeah.
But
I agree with that.
It is nice that he does kind of provide, as we said, the counter to Doll's counters, right? Like if you do see the main fade pick an Archivist, you just go, oh, I have to go the second Jack Doll instead of the first.
Yeah, and he's very capable schemer. He's a very capable schemer by himself, which is kind of a weird thing you don't think about. So you can also like feign in with him and be like, I'm going to get you. Just kidding. I'm going all the way over here and scheming now, which is like a very real thing you can do. Which is
Did you ever use Unquiet Soul and pretend you're playing Jedza?
So the other thing with Dot that's kind of a subtle thing, but that I just want to point out is that a lot of times when masters are really dependent on triggers going off, you're not just saying like I need a crow, you're saying like I need a high crow or a soulstone to make this happen. And Daw has 2 triggers that you really want to hit. But you know, the on your heels on Inaudible Whispers, you can just target a friendly guilty and relent. So you don't need a high mask, you just need a mask. And the TN on Draw Them In is a 4. So you don't need a high ram, you just need a ram. So I think, especially given that he does actually draw a reasonable number of cards, I think that he's pretty resource light, which is nice.
Yeah. But the thing that I will agree with, I do concede to Haku, is that I do often really want to get one punch off on an opponent to put up that that aura, and that does require hitting them, and they often see it coming from a mile away. So oftentimes I'm trying to do that with at least like a 12, or better. So that is a pretty high specific requirement of connecting with that punch, which is annoying. And you have to set that up.
Have you tried him out of keyword yet? Because I feel like this is the kind of thing you can just take out a keyword and then just like go up the engines for like the first 2 turns of a game and just make sure your opponent doesn't score. So like, that's honestly how I see he works. Like he dies turn 3 and you're okay with that.
I played him once in a Seamus 1 Daw 2 list and it was pretty funny.
Yeah,
It
I
works.
can definitely see him being like as a second master, being pretty solid. I mean, he might be the best scheme runner in
He's a really good
Resers.
independent scheme runner. The only other thing I like more than him as a scheme runner is, and we'll get into this later, but Seamus wearing a fancy white rabbit hat, basically.
Yeah, he can do some pretty great stuff, I think, as a second master. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I would want to be locked into his keyword though.
Yeah,
As a main master
I
is the
think
other problem.
low B, high C, low
Yeah,
B, high C.
I'm confident with I'm fine with B.
All right.
All right, we'll move on to Reva now. Reva is honestly one of my deep loves in this game. But then they nerfed Tertiary, and she's dead to me, and I think she's still dead to me. I think she's decently outclassed now, at least Reva 1, with marker removal being a lot more common, easier way of dealing with her models, the fact that at least a decent amount of the good Reser versatiles that she relied on, versatiles, even the tax ones, are all got nerfed in some way or another. And I am just not a fan of her anymore. I almost want to put her in D, but I'll put her at bottom of C just because I really just don't like her anymore. And it
Aw.
sucks because I actually really love the model and how it plays. I don't think I can't put her in D because she actually it definitely isn't that bad. The pulsing of pyro markers can do some pretty neat things, but as I said, I'm not a fan of TN duels having to be a thing, but 2 damage injured is a really great thing, and 14 willpower is, sometimes that's 9s for most people. That being said, I'm just not really a fan. She doesn't have the ability to summon with Toshiro anymore, and that's kind of what made her in my idea, the way I played her at least. And I don't see what she's bringing to the table as much anymore, besides just being big, beefy person.
Yeah, I mean, I will defer. I know you played a lot more of her than me, but I would at least put her above Daw. And a big part of that is just that I think that like we talked about this last time, and so maybe that's just sort of a matter of different heuristics. But I really, when I'm evaluating a master, I think like how easy is it to have a terrible activation with this master? Like how often is your master's activation just gonna suck? Versus, so you don't want to look at necessarily Magical Christmas Land, like how good they can do ideally, but sort of like how difficult is it to have a good useful activation with this master? And I feel like she actually has a pretty easy time having good activations because she has a really strong attack that she doesn't need to put herself in danger to use, and that she can get a ton of plus flips on, basically infinite plus flips on if you want to park her in a pyre marker. And so the floor for her is taking, multiple 3, 4, 5 attacks, with admittedly, not awesome triggers, but they are there. Multiple 3, 4, 5 attacks where she is not putting herself in any danger and where she's getting a plus twist on all those attacks. That's like the floor for a Reva activation, and that's pretty good. And I mean, that's not even getting into all the like weird other stuff she does. Like I agree with you that the Unquiet Dead is good, but like TNs are kind of sus. But she has her ranged attack is okay. I don't love 224. But the built-in plus twist sometimes is kind of neat. Mostly though, I think you're just going to be doing a bunch of ethereal reaping attacks with built-in plus twists, and that's pretty strong. So I'd say, yeah, high C. Maybe even low B, but I'll defer to you on that. High C.
I'm kind of in the same place as Sam, where I think she's better than where we put her, but she's definitely not top of the pack. One of the reasons is I just think that I still value the ability to just heal for 6 for a 4 pretty highly. I mean, it's not always perfect for positioning, but like it's really low TM burden. So for stuff like Assassinate, where it's just like you try and kill Reva and then you fail, and then she's at full health, and then you're like, well, shit. I definitely don't think she's like the top of the pack, but I think with Reva 2 being, in my opinion, as good as she is, that sometimes you'll just find a way that you want to play Reva 1 instead. Because yeah, she's just like a reasonably reliable beater slash backup plan if what you want to bring with the title doesn't work out, and she just plays like the HP go up, HP go down game pretty well. That's it. Oh, she also, is on a horse, and as we know, masters on horses strictly better than masters off horses.
That
So, like, you
unimpeded
get
game is
some-
strong.
You can get some cheeky scheming or symbols plays if you really want with, move 7, charge, pulled here or there, and then like interact. That's, good 17 inches pre-scheme with unimpeded.
Yeah, the unimpeded game is strong. Is that the word of the Pope?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I agree with the Pope. Basically, I also agree with Sam. I also agree with Hawker. I mean, basically, my take on this is that you could flip a coin, and it could be either Reva or Daw at like the top of C tier. I really like her. I like the consistency and damage output. But there's so much better stuff you could be doing in Resers right now. To be quite frank.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is maybe that we're judging on a curve because this faction's insane.
Well, the top end of this faction is Bananaramas.
Yeah, I definitely think that might be hitting this tier list in particular, whereas like in a few other factions, Reva might be higher, which I don't really want.
That's
the
an
one
interesting point.
Yeah,
That's an interesting point.
I'm trying to like maybe honestly she could be like a B in most factions, and maybe that's where she should be just because of that and not grading it by the faction. That being said, I think I still would keep her in the C tier.
Yeah,
I
think
think
that's fine.
I think you made an interesting point. Like, what's the worst case scenario for the master on like why is it good? Except for the only reason I'm thinking of that is as a second master. I think as a second master, if we start getting into Bans format where this is allowed, it's like, would I pay 5 more stones for a writer to have essentially an extra AP and maybe a couple more edge cases on like healing instead of pulsing out injured? And I can potentially see that being more of a thing because she's not actually leader restricted on any of her stuff.
Yeah, but you can the one thing I would say is I can give a rider fast pretty easy, and at that point it's the same AP allotment because you've got ride with me on that fella. Because like a lot of lists can just run sloth, and sloth just hits the rider and it becomes fast.
Well, you'd also have to give it soulstone use.
And it doesn't use soulstones, so it makes its own soulstones, right? So
yeah.
I mean, I when it comes to the way I'm talking about this heuristic, it's more masters in like B and C tier, where that's how I'm evaluating them. Masters that are in S and A tier, you're definitely looking like how good can a turn with this master really be. But when the master's like kind of struggling a little, I think what separates an okay master from a bad one is that sometimes you activate with a bad master and it does nothing. Whereas masters that you can very rarely have a bad activation with them, there's a floor on how bad they can be. So it's more of a floor than a ceiling.
Yeah, I that makes sense. I think you can maybe do some interesting things with Reva again, a second master, especially because Corpse Candle are cost 1. So, you know, not hiring them afterwards isn't even like the worst idea in the world. Although I think you can play easily without them. It's just, she's in a weird spot. I think you'd be like surprised by like how often you don't get the ethereal reaping off from, corpse markers or even models with shielded, mainly because her crew normally is pretty trash. Like her keyword is not the greatest, but
I mean, that's a factor we have to consider. That's like when we were talking about Lucius too, that like if he had a real keyword, he'd be a real master.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about the master, it's insinuated that in general we're assessing the overall power level of the keyword because the keyword is tied to the master, right?
Yeah. So. And that's why I rate her pretty low, is even though she can be like a pretty good floor, her keyword is kind of except for, and I guess we'll switch to it right now, when you make your keyword better by inherently being a better master. I actually am a big fan of Reva too. I wasn't initially. I've watched more people play it, and I've gotten to see it more and see like good crews built around it. But you just turn Vincent into a goddamn monster, and you can almost have him anywhere on the board, minting for like 5, ignoring incorporeal and other good shenanigans. I'm also a massive fan of any ping damage. Healing is also really nice. So it's pretty overall nice. They did finally change their errata so she can no longer kill herself, I believe. So that's
yes,
nice.
They did. That was pretty rare. That was hard to do.
It was really hard to do, but it literally made her unpickable in a couple of things. because you could just Oko her, which would not be great. But now overall, I think she does a much better job at pretty much everything, and really turning on that +1 damage with shielded is really nice. Honestly, just being able to have Ryder ride with me her is also kind of nice, turning down her size, because you never really wanted to take your 7-inch walk. You would much rather someone just be able to place you forward. So weirdly enough, it's sometimes even nicer that she's size 2 off of a horse than on a horse, as blasphemy as that is, according to Landon. But yeah, overall, I'm actually a big fan with her. She turns on her crew a bit more, which is nice. Really turns on Vincent into just an absolute monster. For that, I was like thinking low A, high B. I'm gonna lean to low A. I actually kind of like her. I think you can play her in a lot of things just because of like how easily she can turn on certain things and ping damage and just all that. I love it. It's delicious. Not needing the cards to win games is nice.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you entirely. I would say A as well. I think that, yeah, like, first of all, Luminary's Chosen is a completely bonkers trigger. There's a reason that, like, they very rarely do that. Like, there's not, that effect is not common in this game, and she is in one of the very few Resur keywords that I think can actually take maximum effect. Like, can have like having rapid fire could really, and like having some ranged blast attacks with breath of fire. I think she's really in a position to take advantage of that. But I just really like how all the pieces on her card kind of work with each other. Like, you can drop a pyre marker, which instantly pushes the enemies, which pushes them into the pyre marker, so they take damage, or which pushes friendlies in, so they gain shielded, so that you can then trigger Luminary's Chosen on them, and so that they can then heal. And just like all the different parts of her card like work together in a way that is very satisfying when it's on the board. And I think Fan the Flames is like a really, really good action. Like, you just push a 50 mil marker and then get to tell it like leap 2 of your dudes on a 5 crows. Yeah, I think she's really cool. I think that something like the obvious sort of use case for her is to just have Vincent like machine gun your opponent's crew down, but it's not the only thing the crew does. And even the stuff that doesn't come up often is kind of cool when it does, even though technically her Lampad summon does not actually work.
Well, I guess we'll talk about that a little bit. The current ruling is it does work, just because obviously it's intended to work.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it does
but
work. It's just funny that the way it's
funny.
written.
Yeah, the way it's written, it does not actually work, because it would reduce the burning first, and therefore it doesn't gain any burning, right? And that's the weird reason.
No,
it kills it. It kills it
dies.
before it reduces burning.
Mhm.
Yeah, therefore it never reduced the value of burning, and therefore it doesn't
Correct.
heal. The Lampad doesn't heal at all.
That is correct. Yeah, I mean, obviously it works because it's obviously intended to work, and it's not like weird as trying to write a programming language on their cards. It's just funny. But I think she's great. She seems like a lot of fun.
Resur's Sniff Glue. Yeah. If she was on a horse, easy S tier. But she's not on a horse, so I've talked myself down off that ledge. She
Off that
checks a
horse?
lot of the boxes. Yeah, off that horse. She checks a lot of the boxes that I really like when I'm looking at a master, right? She has unresisted damage. She has, healing that is low TN burden. Like, she's a really low TN burden model to begin with. Like, you're asking for a Luminary's Chosen every turn, and then sometimes like an okay card for Immolate, and that's it, right? And then you just have all this out of activation movement for you and your crew that's just really super solid. And no one said no to a min-5 gun that you can shoot 3 times a turn, right? Like, that's just not a thing people complain about. And I'm sure, I don't know if you Reser guys have brewed with this at all or not, but like, there's probably some disgustingness you could do somewhere, giving a master Luminary's Chosen, and then just shooting the crap out of people with models that were never intended to get +1 damage.
Honestly, I don't actually think that is the best thing, just because like it's all about volume of attacks. Like, the reason that that Luminary's Chosen is so good in her is because Vincent gets 3 shots, or because Lampad has an attack with double blast on severe. So if you double blast somebody with a Lampad that's in Luminary's Chosen, you're dealing 5 to the target and 4 each to anyone under a 50 mil. That's like enormous amount of damage.
It is kind of weird how it doesn't say damage to target +1.
Right?
Like
Like
every
other
additional
effect in the game
damage.
does
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Which is why you can use it with your like ping damage, or I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure there's got to be something out there that since you can give shielded to anything in the faction that you want with the graveyard spirit, there's got to be something someone hasn't found yet that's just really gross.
Sure. Also, just you remember also that you still get that extra damage from what's it called? That thing on the front of her card.
Visions of Fire.
Visions of Fire. Yeah. So if a Lampad hits this is a bit Magical Christmas Land, but if a Lampad under Luminary's Chosen gets a severe and touches 2 models in the blast, it's dealing 6 to the person it hit and 5 each to the people in the blast. So that's just 16 damage off of a single attack.
Yeah.
That's
I-
almost Mad Dog levels.
That's almost Mad Dog bracket.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I mean, Dead Rider's obviously an interesting. It would have been an interesting choice. It's actually good they removed like the +1 the 1 damage from him, because imagine just giving shielded. He walks in, bonus action, just 2 damage to the crew. So yeah, it's there might be some jank in there. I haven't seen it. I haven't found any. It really is just really solid on like her old crew, which is why she's so good. Is she's actually works with her keyword really well.
I agree with everybody. I think the best stuff she has going on for her is Luminary's Chosen, and the fact that I just in general like the fact that she has an Immolate that can do spike damage, which is I think pretty significant. Like when you really need to kill something, she can make it happen. In addition to the general like aura of increased +1 damage, which is just insane in this game. Like obviously it is. The other thing is Visions of Fire reminds me a heck of a lot of an ability that I really, really enjoy called Breach Burnt on a model I really like called Maxine 2. And it's just super powerful. So like a lot of the things that she does independently, Visions of Fire combined with a nuke button, combined with a +1 damage aura, make her a good master. And yeah, I think that puts her firmly top mid A for me, basically.
Yeah, one of the only things I would wonder about would be if you hire her in McMourning 2, get the Trail of Slime out, and she's pushing the pyro markers around with Hazard's Train on them.
Yeah.
How well that actually works, and I always thought that would be a funny thing to do, but like how it works too, like when the pyro marker leaves base contact, does it turn into normal? When it gets replaced on there with the trigger, does it turn back on before or after the push damage happens? That's one of the things I would actually need to get asked, but we'll see. I think easy A. And to get into that McMourning talk, we'll just move right on to McMourning, who
Doggy.
I am still not a big fan of McMourning 1. I have never been a big fan of him. He is a lot better because of what we'll get to talking about, which is McMourning 2 being so viable. And the fact that sometimes you do just want to take him because he is precise and he can just murder a model with stat 7. Like I almost really like the narrow strengths here. He does one thing, he does it amazingly well. When those situations come up, he can be, perversely good. But other than that, I think he's kind of bad. He really just is like, I'm a giant stat sick. His keyword kind of also isn't that amazing. Kind of pretty bad, but he can do some really funny things, and precise on a stat 7 attack that's 2/3/5 crit strike and injured 2 means you can get some kind of nutty damage out. So
All right.
I think narrow strength is pretty admirable. Against Arcanists, you can just be like, oh, I don't want to play McMourning 2. I'm just gonna go nom things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like insofar as McMourning is suffering right now, it's something I brought up in the last video with Guild, where the game is really dangerous right now. Like it's a really deadly game right now. So if your game plan is I'm going to take my move 5 master and I'm going to take walk actions with him until I can take a charge action with him, and then I'm going to charge in and make attacks with him. Like, yeah, he's really good in combat. He does a lot of damage and he heals himself every time he hits somebody. But he's not that hard to kill. And he's really got to put himself in harm's way. And it's also that McMourning 2 is so cool. It's hard for me to pick him instead. But he has some interesting synergy with his crew. Like I like field testing. I think that's neat. But it's also there's some stuff in his card that's kind of at war with itself. Like Catalyst makes you think. Like Catalyst is obviously not intended to do offensive damage. It is a defensive ability in this crew. But it makes you think that you're trying to kill enemy models by poisoning them to death, like with Rancid Transplant, which is not what you're trying to do. And like a lot of stuff on his card, it makes more sense when you think about poison as regen for him. But when you do think about it that way, what you're basically saying is like this is a melee beat stick master with a lot of healing, and that's cool. But I think it's a fairly narrow strength. It doesn't really make you win games just by doing that. Like he can remove models, but lots of things in this faction can remove models really effectively that aren't your master.
I think before the change to how conditions work, the Rancid Transplant nuke was a totally viable option to pursue that was a bit underused. Like, I think the biggest problem with McMourning isn't necessarily anything on his card. It's just that the rest of his keyword that he kind of supports crumbles beneath him if you just kind of play it as it is. And the title fixes that and the not title doesn't. Because like he's got some pretty solid actions. Summoning a flesh construct is still really good, but he doesn't have like the engine to support that innately on his card, so he kind of has to get into combat to do that. And he also like he's not anywhere near as bad as Ototo with the Ototo problem, but he's got like mini Ototo problem where he's a really good combat model that has really bad
The
willpower
no
and move.
Toto.
So like he just has this problem where he either can't get into combat, it costs too much to get him into combat, or once he's in combat, he just gets disabled and is irrelevant. So that's my thoughts.
Was that the word of the Pope?
Yeah, that's word of the Pope.
All right. Yeah, he's kind of like for me, I think of him as like a bizarro Wolverine. He's the worst at what he does, and what he does isn't very pretty, which is like he walks up the field and punches stuff with precise, but then probably immediately dies to a master that just does more damage, basically, in my mind. I haven't played with him much for that reason, to be honest. I think I have like one rep on this guy. I just think he's kind of underwhelming. I'd put him at the very bottom of C, maybe even D, in my opinion. Honestly.
Yeah. I don't think for the same reason.
I definitely
don't
think he's worse
wanna-
than Daw 1. I definitely think he's
Oh,
worse than Daw
interesting.
1.
You know, the only reason I disagree with that and have him above him right now is purely because of like how he defines 3 and no strengths. I think that there are situations where you take him where he absolutely just murders with precise and the sword.
I guess
like-
that's fair.
Like when he is like in the zone for murdering, it's really perversely good. Like he can just get in there. If you don't have like stun or like giving him maybe like a bunch of distracted, some way to shut him down that isn't necessarily just killing him. He can
Then give
he can
me
just
give
do
me
a
give me
lot.
like an example of a crew that you would be hyped to take him into. Give me like one.
Kirai maybe. Against a decent amount of Arcanists too.
I mean, Mei Fang.
I think Mei
Yeah, I
Fang
guess
would be
Mei Fang
nice.
too. Mei Fang too.
Either Mei
Anything
Fang,
where
yeah.
like you have to overcome armor and hard to kill to a degree, is going to be it. So Mei Fang 2 at the moment. What else would I like him against?
No, Mei Fang 2 is enough. That's a prevalent part of the meta. That's fair. That's a good
Yan
point.
Lo as well, actually.
Oh,
He
interesting.
can
Because
be
of
just
the
a dog
doggos.
murderer.
Yeah. He takes dogs for walks to the cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, if you stone for the crit strike, you kill a dog on a severe.
Yeah. That's a good
Um,
point. Okay, point
You
taken.
don't
Alright.
need the stone for the crit strike.
Yeah.
Dogs only have 5 health, my dude.
Oh, I thought they had 6. Never mind.
You can
Withdrawn.
kill him with a moderate on a severe.
Kill him with a
him.
moderate. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Point taken. I agree with that. All right. Middle of C, I guess. I'm fine with.
McMourning 2. The reason why McMourning 1 probably makes it to C, because you can think about taking him, because you can always just pick McMourning 2. Always. This model is good. He's really
Yeah, he's
good.
awesome.
Turns on the rest of his team. He has Don't Mind Me on him for some reason, as well as Disguise. I don't think he even needed those abilities. He just has them. The main best part is the Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, where he's going to be popping out more markers, popping out more cards. He's just so much resources for free. Literally no TNs on most of the resource management using like the canines in order to just pick up markers, draw a card, and then still make the corpse marker afterwards. Or just have 2 corpse markers. Just start duping corpse markers. Like there's so many good ways you can just take advantage of reduced reuser cycle. That it's a little disgusting. Getting Trail Slime out there with his upgrades are amazing. It's one of the best upgrade. It's one of the best abilities hands down in the game. For the longest time was only on Grave Goo. Now they allowed McMourning to put it on any one of his models, which is just not fair. Kind of at all. And that enables him to really just get in there, do whatever he wants, has sludge markers that model can bring around his stew if it's the corpse curator, who also using models to reduce. He did get hit by the nerf bat. I don't think it matters that much. It is kind of sad you can't stack upgrades on one model anymore. That was kind of just insidiously broken because they reduced damage down to 0 when you removed him. Now he has to play a little bit smarter. He can't do the poison strat, so he's not just like god tier broken, but he is still a really good master, and that's just not going to change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about S. I could be convinced on this. I would say like very high A. He did get, maybe that's just me like reacting to the fact that he was nerfed in 3 separate ways. In the most recent round of nerfs, with one of them being the poison change, obviously. I think that I'm getting more comfortable with A because he buffs his crew really enormously, but he's a master that doesn't do a ton without his crew. And so there's like a level of dependence there, and gives something your opponent can pick apart. But yeah, I mean, reduce, reuse, recycle is just an incredibly stupid rule. And all of the appendage upgrades are completely pushed. Like all of those upgrades could, I think, pretty easily lose one of their rules. Because they all have 3 rules, with one of them being the ability to just pitch them. All of those could lose 1 rule and still be good. But they don't. They have all 3. And yeah, like he does not require any resources from your hand. He needs a 6 to do his thing. He draws a bunch of cards. He generates a bunch of markers. He pretty easily summons a flesh construct every turn. It's not hard to set that up, and that doesn't even have a TN. So yeah, the only inconvenience there is the fact that it distracts him. Gives you weird order of activation issues with Desperate Plot. But because Desperate Plot does have a TN, so I don't want to take Desperate Plot attacks when I'm distracted. Actually, wait, do you
Only distracted does not work against friendly minions.
Then yeah, that's ridiculous. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's really good. I don't know about S. I could be convinced, but why does he have disguised?
So
why does he have disguised? Why does he have Don't Mind Me?
The reason why he's S is because before people didn't really abuse the disguise Don't Mind Me, because it was way better to keep in the back and just keep handing out upgrades, keep trading corpse markers. Now you just have to play him differently, and it's still really good because he has disguise Don't Mind Me stat 6 move. So yeah, he can kind of just walk around and do whatever the damn well please schemes and strats wise by himself. He's 13 wounds, heals from his own poison. Really hard to put down. That's why. Landon?
Yeah. So sniffing glue comes naturally to Resers, and that's why they have these crazy sort of things that don't make any sense. I'm kind of like bordering A and S myself. Like, I was gonna put him in A when we started the video, which is why I was saying that there's only one S tier master in Resers, and I still think that I want to say he's A to hold that firm stance. But TN-less summoning is just really gross. He generates a lot of value for your crew, but he does have out of activation movement, which is one of my favorite things in general. But I mean, he still has to run with experimental, right? And even with upgrades, experimental can become a little squishy if you're just hiring right into it. And he might be a schemer with Don't Mind Me, but Like he doesn't have a way to ignore terrain, so he's still not super great at scheming. So like I don't think his strengths are so strong that you don't interact with them in any way, which is what I usually kind of reserve for S. Like I think he's just incredibly efficient, not incredibly obnoxious, I guess. So I think I want to put him back in A.
Is that the word of the Pope?
That's the word.
All right. I agree with the Pope, honestly. Basically, my thoughts on this guy are a couple. One, he's a big brain master, which means that you're to get the top efficiency out of his card because he does so much. You're gonna have to really make sure that your play lines with him are really, really good. There's a couple other masters that I'm gonna have that feedback for also later. One of them in particular, but he has a lot of play to him, and because he has a lot of play to him, you're going to have a lot of play lines all the time with him, and you're going to have to make sure that you make those right play lines, especially because the crew around him is not very powerful. I'm not a huge fan of his keyword, the models he has access to comparatively, and yeah, and I guess because of that, I'd put him kind of like A. I'd probably put him middle A, top A, probably. But
Yeah,
I don't know if I
still
would
think
put
he's
him
an
in
A,
front
but it
of.
would be at the top of A.
Yeah,
Oof.
I don't
You
know.
know,
Yeah, probably.
this is one I'll kind of admit. The
Post nerf.
nerfs
This is post nerf.
wanted
Post
me
nerf.
to put him a
If there
little
was no
bit more in
nerfs,
A,
if there was no
but
nerfs, you'd be easy S.
I've been talking with other people, and I still think all of his strengths are still there. With Rogue Necro is actually still just an actually amazing model when you give him charge through or flurry, especially flurry because it works with him. And Corpse Curator really turns on a lot of his abilities to still get Twisted Genius off, get, in my opinion, actually literally the best upgrade in the game, which is the Trail of Slime. It just map dependently, admittedly, but it can just completely screw over whole entire maps. And putting it on a Rogue Necro is, can make him also pretty tanky, or just putting it on, um, the Corpse Curator himself. That I don't know if I want to be convinced into putting this in a say. I'm really hesitant just because you can still do really silly things with plastic surgery, um, like slapping Dead Rider's ability onto the um, Corpse Curator and attacking people and reaping them like from miles away using markers on the ground, as well as just hiring Sloth and just allowing your totem to start fasting models. And I think that you don't need too much of the experimental crew as you used to need in order to really make him good. You probably are just hiring Rogue Necro, Corpse Curator, and maybe Sebastian to make doggos because doggos are really good. But I'm not sure. I might be able to be talked into A, but I mean, it's still just plastic surgery is such a good ability, generating the flesh constructs. I think I think Landon pointed out his biggest weakness, which is the whole um nothing in the crew besides little gassers who whatever ignores terrain really. He doesn't have unimpeded.
His crew is what's holding him back, I would say.
Put him
Like-
on a horse or give Kirai unimpeded, easy S tier.
Landon's like, put him on a horse or get him the hell out of here.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. Like the fact that Kentari don't have unimpeded because centaurs aren't horses, kind of sucks. Like he really can just get turned down by the map having severe terrain, and that's I think literally his only weakness. So, but it's kind of funny because it's also a strength because maps with big severe terrain normally it's maybe in like one big river or something like that. It's also you can just go make it entirely hazardous. So
Yeah, but in general, maps tend to have severe terrain on them. Like, oh no, my one weakness, the thing that's on most maps.
it's I mean most masters have to play around severe terrain. It's not the hardest thing to do in the world, especially when you're move 6 and you have ride with me models and you still have Dead Rider in your crew. and you're able to make your dogs monsters because you can give them Rogue Necros like ranged breath attack.
No, I mean, listen, we all agree he's good,
I
right?
just-
We're arguing between A and S, I guess. you know?
Yeah.
We all agree he's a good master. He's not a bad master, right? But is he S tier? Does he belong with two others that I'm thinking of? Maybe.
If the other one, yeah, I think honestly, I have S tier. My opinion is 2 right now, actually, and McMourning being potentially one of them. And I think, this is one of those weird spots again, where at the point where it's like, are we judging this off of like in Resers, or are we judging this off of like where they would be in other keywords? Because I think he's an easy yes in most other keywords.
Agreed. But I think you judge in Resers. We're judging in faction, right?
Yeah,
The tier list of the faction.
But it is also like the tier list of like when can you play him in certain pools. I mean, Desperate Plot being out of turn movement's amazing.
I think low S is fine. I think it's fine. I think low S is fine. S tier is fine. Or in S tier. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna put up a fight. I still think A, but if you want to put him in S,
I think
I'll let
he is
myself
high
get
A.
outruled because
I think he's high A, but if you want him in S,
it.
I would say he's low S. I think there's people in front of him for sure.
This is going to be a very weird tier list because A tier is going to be filled with absolute monsters that destroy probably most other factions. But
Welcome to Resers.
that's
Yeah.
that's
dude,
gangrene for you.
That's the Resers, man.
whereas Guild, we just slam them all into S because they kind of were
Brandon
at least
agrees.
equally all good. Whereas this one has one key model that is just even more broken. So yeah, fine. I'll let myself be talked into it, and then I'll just go to Seamus.
Can I tell you how to get to the Red Chapel? Minimum damage of 4.
The model I think is absolutely just trash. I hate this master. I don't understand why people keep playing it. That being said, I can acknowledge that it's still like kind of good because it does like weird things, but I think it's very specific in those things. So I'm actually going to slam this near top of B because, to be honest, I don't like the models you have to hire in order to get a corpse on the other side, mainly because Carrying Emissary is just an absolute trash model. The flintlock gun, I'm not the biggest fan, even though it can ignore hard to wound. It can't ignore people stoning, so you're really kind of stuck on hoping you're actually outstatting them, and you're only set 6, so you're picking off maybe a key model. The best part about it is that you can probably get 2 shots, and 2 shots min 4 is enough for a lot of people to kill them, or just take up absolutely a ton of resources. And he's a little hard to kill. I mean, not that hard to kill, except for literally, but it's defense 4, terrifying 12. It's not hard to get ruthless nowadays. You're mostly relying on the fact that your totem switches position with you and then immediately dies. With marker removal being a bit more common, you're going to be seeing a lot of your actual corp markers you decided to set it on for just potentially just not being there anymore. He's just wonky to me now. He's still good because Secret Passage on a master will always be good, as we kind of talked about for Lucius. Red Chapel is probably the worst keyword in Resers, and that's hard to contend with because honestly, as we've talked about, all of these cruise keywords are kind of trash. That being said, they got a buff with Madame Sybil being a lot better. So I'm on the fence. I'm not a big fan of him because I don't like his play style. I acknowledge that it can be very pub stompy though, like super pub stompy. And it also can just be always like kind of not bad because unlike in Guild, you have Whisper in Resers, which makes Secret Passage a much, much more reliable ability. So him as a scheme runner is amazing. Him as a second master can just be amazing. Him as your master, I'm not a big fan of. I think he does, as B says, he has very specific strengths, and that's where I'll end it. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I would put him mid low B, high C, maybe. I think B actually is probably fine because I think the White Rabbit code gives him like a really just a new lease on life. Like that unlocks some really crazy shit you can do with him. Like a master that can just teleport twice, shoot a model, and score breakthrough at the end of the turn is pretty solid. It addresses some of his his issues with survivability because he is defense 4, and I think he's a little bit harder than defense 4 makes him look, just because you can't really afford. One of the things about defense 4 that makes it so bad is that like anything your opponent throws at you is probably going to hit, so they can chip you down. But you can't really afford to try to just throw chip damage at Seamus because they will fail their terrifying duel and heal him. So you have to actually, if you're trying to attack him, you have to actually attack him. And that makes defense 4 maybe hurt a little bit less than it would otherwise, but it does still hurt. It means if your opponent wants to hit him, they will. He is a bit pub stompy, but I think the ability to teleport around and be a scheme marker kind of puts he creates points while he's doing the thing he wants to be doing anyway. Like he scores deathbeds easily, he scores breakthrough. He can do this stuff like while he's doing the thing he wants to be doing. You are getting points, so I do like that. I think that he is a little bit one trick, and it's a trick that's less impressive than it used to be. And I think it also maybe part of it is that he is the nature of the way people hire crews these days is not what he wants to be doing. Like he would love it if people were hiring a bunch of 6 to 8 health like expensive minions or enforcers that he could just blow away. But people are going for these very compact elite crews. And taking big soulstone pools, which he doesn't like to see, because if he's just shooting somebody for 4 damage and then maybe they have, some manner of reducing that, that's a pretty low value activation. Oh, and also you got to have the Whisper on him. He is stapled to the Whisper 100% of the time. So whether you see that as a tax or as just like, imagine these rules are printed on his card, it's kind of up to you. So I would say mid-low B, maybe high C, just because there are fewer circumstances than there used to be where his flintlock is great.
Sam, you're kicked off Danger Planet. It's over. I'm sorry. It's over.
I'm definitely comfortable with the B rating. Yeah, he does have the Whisper tax on him, but I feel like it's something most Resur Masters pay. He definitely is a high card burden activation, so he's definitely not getting into A, right? But the things that I like about him, actually, I disagree with you on that. Malifaux Burns has made him worse, mostly because you actually just got like, I don't know how many new enforcers in the game, specifically enforcers that people now are playing in most of their crews.
No, I didn't say Malifaux Burns made him worse. I said the way people are generally building crews is these smaller, more elite crews with Soulstone users. I do think Malifaux Burns improved him.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I think in the Malifaux Burns meta, most of the crews hire their really key enforcer that brings a lot of power to the crew, and he loves killing key enforcers that are important to the crew. There are a lot of them that just die to a Seamus shot, right? And most of them aren't super high stats. Like, sure, you won't one shot 33 just because he's 8 wounds, but like if you bring it,
I believe.
Okay, fair. But if it uses the coffin trick once, suddenly you do one shot it. And so like there's just a lot of really powerful enforcers right now that he kind of keeps in check, I think. And then Terrorize is actually a pretty low-key decent ability. So I don't agree that he's necessarily one trick. Like he's got 3 reasonable actions that allow for different play patterns. He's just definitely always going to have a very expensive turn. So you kind of just have to know what lines to look for when you start the game playing him. So I think between his mobility and his ability to disrupt opponent's crews in a variety of different ways, he gets enough flexibility that I'm comfortable putting him in B as opposed to C. He definitely has problems though.
I think I love this guy. Like he's my favorite master to play. It's probably the most fun I've ever had when I play Malifaux is playing with Seamus. The White Rabbit Co. I totally agree with Sam. It's giving him an entirely new lease on life. Being able to have him wear a scheme marker effectively really allows for very quick scoring. Most of the time, I look to take him in pools where I know that I can score breakthrough with almost 0 effort, basically. That's when I really think of him as the best. When I see, is there a deployment zone where this makes sense, and does it have breakthrough? And then I say, okay, cool. From there, how playable is he? And if he checks any other boxes, then he's super playable in that pool. And if he doesn't check any other boxes, I then probably look for some of the other masters, basically. So I guess because of that, I would put him in low B, mid B, like because he has really specific strengths and is kind of the definition of that category in my mind, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're all kind of agreed. The problem I have is going on to Seamus too, is I really haven't seen this guy much. I'm not the biggest fan of him, honestly, just because, and the reason I haven't really tried to mess with him much, one, because the other tools and resers are kind of too pretty and sparkly right now. And I don't think this guy is a diamond in the rough. I think he's just rough. Willpower 4, we talked about defense 4 being bad. Willpower 4 is almost worse on a master because a lot of like willpower attacks can just be like debilitating attacks where they might not necessarily be killing you, but they can be repositioning you. They can be
Not him.
stacking on different conditions. Although he has laugh off, so yeah, right. Yeah. As I said, he has laugh off, and he has stealth, which is like really good. But like from like what I expect him to do is like be annoying and give people distracted, and then just summon a model. And it's not like his crew is the greatest at getting a corpse marker to summon a model off of. So part of that is kind of wonky. Are you hiring the carrion emissary again just to get corpse markers?
Or you're
That's
just
also
using
depressing.
amputation.
Right, he just makes his own corpse. That's the point.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that trigger. You just declare it against your own friends. Yeah, it's a pretty hefty damage you have to do against your own model though for amputation. Yeah, as I said, I haven't seen this model much, so I'm actually like hesitant to even be the first one to place him. I almost want to put him somewhere in C, maybe B, just looking at him, but I literally I don't have much of a ground to stand on because I really haven't seen this model be played.
So I would put him in B. I'd put him above the original Seamus. And the reason I would do that is two things. First, that his card works really well with itself. He wants to, so like you look at his card and you're like, what does this master do? And it really kind of pops off the card. Like he wants to make his own corpse markers, which he can do. He then wants to use those corpse markers to summon a bell, which you can do. And then he wants to go absolutely bananas with generating 1 million attacks using Bloody Display and Take by the Hand to trigger Why Hello Love and just rack up damage. That's one thing that is, you could do an astonishing amount of damage very quickly with that. Like, I mean, if we're going into like to theory, it is you charge your opponent, you put up Urban Legend first, but so let's say you do that. You charge your opponent, you hit him with Bladed Bouquet and you stone for amputation. Then they get the marker. Then you Arise My Sweet, summoning off the marker. And so now they have a red chapel minion within 1 inch of them. Now you can Take by the Hand. They're at a minus twist to resist it because of the red chapel minion. Maybe you get the execute trigger, maybe you don't, but either way, you push them. That triggers Why Hello Love. You get an attack off of Why Hello Love. You can either stone or just have the card for Bloody Display, which again, they're going to fail the duel. And you push them, and you do another free attack. So, I mean, again, that's kind of Magical Christmas Land. And so then that gets me to kind of the weakness, which is that he's very resource hungry. He has these triggers he really wants to hit. He has a TN. And I mean, yeah, if you get you are not as high a TN if you have, done the amputation to get the corpse marker. You don't need to, like, for example, stone for the suit, but it's still a TN. It's a summoning TN. It's reasonable. And he has to hit with a lot of his stat 6 melee attack. And he does have the benefit of, right behind you. So if you can isolate a model, that's useful, but that won't always be something you want to do, or the model that's isolated won't always be something you care to send him at. So I think that the floor, or the gap between what he can theoretically do and what he will do most of the time is bigger than most masters. And when you're not getting that, you're making a bunch of 2, 3, 4 melee attacks with your master, which doesn't really feel good. But the other thing that I really like about him is Alone in the Dark is a bonkers trigger. There are times when that trigger just like completely on its own will like ruin a crew's game plan. Like your opponent doesn't get to benefit from friendly auras at all. And Laugh Off and Stealth are kind of in that vein, in the sense that they're abilities that sometimes matter a ton. And I do think Laugh Off mitigates his willpower being 4 a bit. Not entirely. There are willpower attacks, like attacks that stun really, really, really suck against him. Attacks that, just that apply distracted are pretty bad. But Laugh Off does mean at least that your opponent can't push him out of combat and stagger him and make it impossible for him to do anything useful that way. So there's that. And Stealth also means that generally your opponent is not going to get a ton of activations to do stuff about him, because they're going to, once they're close enough for Stealth to take effect, he's close enough to get in there and start messing with them. So they're going to get some ability to hit him before he gets to them, but they're not going to be able to just sort of wail on him with impunity from downfield while he trudges up at move 5. So I think that I'm comfortable with B, because I think that Alone in the Dark is absolutely insane, and his card, kind of all his abilities kind of flow very nicely into each other, but he is ultimately resource hungry and doesn't generate resources, and his crew doesn't really generate resources. So you are faced with either having to really rely on your deck a lot, or using your hand to make your master work and then not having a hand left to make the rest of your crew work. And his crew doesn't really work well if you don't have a good hand. So yeah, B. That's kind of where I'm at. I know that's kind of a long spiel to end up in he's okay, but he's okay.
Yada 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 yada.
No, I
B.
think that was a very good explanation, because I think that was like kind of like the counterpoint to my like hesitant take on him. Is those are pretty much all the interesting things you can do with the model, and they are interesting things. They are just, as you pointed out, like very card intensive and very soulstone intensive, possibly even if you don't have the good high cards. Because I mean, everything on his card has a TN and nothing draws cards in his crew.
Yeah. Although, again, just to reiterate one more time, there are some crews that if you Alone in the Dark them, just instantly lose.
That is a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you left me anything to say, to be completely honest. I guess the only thing is that, Rezzers are sniffing glue when they have this model. Even you already said that he has some of the tools that negate the Ototo problem of having willpower 4. So like Stealth and Laugh Off kind of help out with that. So no, I mean, I agree. What else can I say?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Also, I would put him firmly in B, because he has really specific strengths. Again, he is quite the definition of the category in which he leads, which is when Alone in the Dark works, or when it's like, really effective, it can shut down entire crews. I've played with 3 games with this guy now, and one game he was ineffectual. His abilities kind of did nothing, and the other 2 times they just shut the entire opponent's crew down by himself, single-handedly.
I mean,
also he has Stealth, which is totally nuts on a master, obviously.
the one thing I'm actually
Stealth.
thinking I really love about this guy is
And Laugh Off, right? He has Laugh Off, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
he has Laugh Off.
Yeah, he has Stealth and Laugh Off, and he has, all he needs to do is do that, basically that dance that Sam described. But having Stealth and Laugh Off really helps with that. So helps get into position at least.
Yeah. I do like the fact that if you're against Explorers, and Explorers can only declare EVS, obviously, then you do just turn off their whole entire crew.
Yeah, it's
So
wild.
that is kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's a wild and crazy time.
But then the downside is that if they if there's terrain on the board, like, oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, he's B.
Honestly, that's the Rezer problem. And that it is actually the biggest problem in Rezzers is they have Dead Rider and Valley, and that's it.
Yeah, I think you're very much priced into Dead Rider. And being priced into an 11 stone model is, I mean, the Dead Rider's good, but being priced into an 11 stone model is kind of like gives me pause.
Yeah, when it's the Dead Rider, it's not too pause worthy, but yeah,
Dead Rider's pretty great.
True.
He's a good boy.
Molly, how quickly can we go make people hate us for how much I hate Molly?
Tread carefully, my friend.
I don't really want a few key players in Vassal to hear me say this, but Molly is kind of trash, guys. Like, Did how well is Miss doing in the tournaments is probably how good Molly is, right?
Who?
Or sorry,
Cackle.
maniacal.
You're trying to say
Cackle.
Cackle. I
Cackle,
don't-
we
Yeah.
love you, but we're about to say mean things about your girlfriend.
Yeah, how good's Cackle
Has
doing
Cackle
in
even
tournaments
played
right
Molly
now?
yet?
Molly 2? I don't know.
I know he practiced Molly 2 a bit, but I don't know that he actually.
He's been talking
played
about the
Molly
Molly 2
You
double
guys are
hanged list.
you guys are
Okay,
out
yeah,
of line.
we're-
I'm just saying this right now. You guys are out of line.
Yeah,
This
so
is
we're about to
crazy.
just trash this model.
This
This
is crazy.
model
All right, I'll wait my turn. I'll
sucks.
shut up. I'll shut up. I'll shut up.
I mean, defense 5, willpower 6 is actually kind of a joke. I mean, hard to wound, cool. Serene continence, nice, I guess. The problem is so many like killer crews have ways of getting plus flips on their attack, and also like min 4s, min 3s, and they just like eat through this model. So it's a very easy model to kill realistically. It's really clever thing, obviously, is Gorgon's influence. Being able to draw a new hand of cards if you pitch your whole hand of cards is really nice. And the whole less caress thing, which is if you take an action already declared, that activation within Molly's line of sight, you take 2 damage. There are some fun and interesting things you can do with that. I think Madame Civil being buffed this model. Honestly, she works really well with the Red Chapel stuff and always kind of has been, which is just weird. She's literally in the wrong keyword. Her own keyword, I don't know if you want to hire like almost any models from it besides the fact that she has Crueligans, which are, some of the more broken scheme runners in the game, and that obviously has to make her a bit more relevant than not. That being said, I've never really cared enough about this model to ever be afraid of it. I mean, 10 wounds is just really a small amount of wounds for a model who kind of has to get relatively close to do the thing she wants. Disturbing Stories, range 8. I mean, Irreducible is irreducible, but it's also weird. Because you draw up to hand size as your opponent. It's always been like I guess that doesn't matter because it's based off of their maximum hand. Either way, it's a weird one to control. Activation control matters a lot. I'm just not the biggest fan. I almost want to put her in C. I think there could be arguments for low B. I'm going to hesitantly put her in high C, just because I do think Less Caress is an underrated thing, and maybe I'm missing something. Like Cackle actually does do some pretty interesting things. I have seen some pretty fun things with Sybil and Red Chapel stuff to make Disturbing Story and just her melee or not just her one more question like pretty good because you can just start slowing these people and hurting them a decent amount. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna stick with C right now and let you guys change my mind.
I mean, I don't actually have that much table time against Molly because Doug always plays Seamus and Kirai against me. But sort of just seeing the way other people play her and seeing the way she does in those games, I'm comfortable with C, with high C. I would be comfortable. I would edge more towards low B than high C because it does seem like she does some really cool things, but it does also seem like parts of her card are kind of at war with each other. Like when you activate her in a turn is a question that matters a lot, and it matters a lot more than with certain other masters. Because the later you activate her, the better Disturbing Story gets, and the earlier you activate her, of course, assuming you're spending cards, the better Gorgon's influence gets. And so this sort of a lot of her mechanics are Punisher mechanics, which is a term I'm stealing from Magic. It's like a mechanic where kind of your opponent can decide how bad it is. And so that makes me, it's not quite to the same extent as like a master that's relying on shockwaves, but that's what gives me pause is that some of what is your opponent does have the ability to kind of blunt the blow or at least decide where it falls.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about Punisher mechanics, because I'm also an ex-Magic guy / recovering Magic addict, is that it was always bad for you when your opponent could decide what would happen to them, basically.
I will say Debt of Gratitude is really, really good trigger. Debt of Gratitude is a great trigger, and she has it on an 8-inch range stat 6 willpower attack. That attack is not awesome otherwise. So I don't know, but like that trigger rules.
Landon?
Okay. So if Molly's crew is better, I'd put her in B. She has a lot of like good tricks as far as like tricks are concerned. Activation control is, still really good and an important part of any aggro type play. So having constructive criticism for the reactivate to get you an activation up is just pretty good. I actually think One More Question is a pretty awesome attack. The problem I have is that, as you said, Disturbing Story only works if your opponent lets it work. And Gorgon's Influence can be really good on certain boards. I can't deny that. But like most boards aren't set up so that you have pure unadulterated line of sight from one end to the other from standing anywhere on the board.
What's Chris? You mean?
Sure. However you want to say it.
Is that the word of the Pope?
I had a couple more points.
Okay, please,
So
by all
like,
means.
in order to like really, I think, get the max value out of Molly, you have to take a lot of stuff out of keyword, and like you can see the prolific Molly player who plays Molly do that very frequently. So you end up paying a lot of taxes to like play models that other keywords can already just kind of play, with, in my opinion, no real synergies created between the master and the other models other than the fact that you draw cards to support them. And like, don't get me wrong, that's kind of, I think, something that Rezzers lacks in general, which is why they get the Whisper as an upgrade. But I don't think Lost Knowledge and her ability to draw cards with her front of card really makes up for the amount of extra soul stones you have to pay to play the same game as another master. Because like if you look in her keyword, you've got, I think, the highest defense 4 of any keyword in the game, with like Archie, Philip, Rogue Necro, like name another keyword with 4 defense 4, models that cost more than 8 stones. And I think there might be another one I'm just forgetting. So like she's got some problems there, and I think that's the word of the Pope.
Yeah. I mean, I love playing Molly Squidpiddge. This is also one of my favorite masters to play, but I would put her. I was thinking a lot as you guys were talking and thinking about what you guys were saying and comparing it to my own personal play experience. And actually, part of me learning was watching the great Cackle himself on YouTube's like reps that he had, and I would basically apply those like lessons to my LGS directly to people's faces at my LGS. I would put her high C, low B, realistically, unfortunately. I'd probably put her somewhere with Jackdaw 2 around power level, probably. Maybe right behind Seamus, realistically, if I had to think about it. In like the new Burns meta. So
Interesting. Yeah, I'm I don't know. My problem is like I think the new Burns meta really kind of even hit harder on the old Serene Continence problem. Like,
well,
I
she has
don't
lost
know.
knowledge, dude. Lost knowledge is a huge deal in the Burns meta.
I'm not convinced on how true that is after playing against Jedza a few times now in Burns. Like, you need mass marker removal. And spending a master AP to draw 2 cards is most of the time normally fine. It being TN5 is always like kind of funny because most of the time you're drawing it when you're low on cards, but she kind of counters that out with Gorgon's Influence, but also that makes Lost Knowledge a bit worse. Because if they're
Yeah, but
keeping their hand light for a Disturbing Story, then you also have the problem where Gorgon's Influence draws you up, and then you can't Lost Knowledge. But why do you care at that point? You care for the marker removal. It goes
But
back
there's
and forth.
been, think about it this way. I have one counterpoint for you to think about. What about taking her as a really solid defensive pick where I could take like Kruligan and Night Terror spam into a pool that had like Deathbed and Research Mission, knowing that I could park my ass in the middle of the board after riding a Dead Rider there and just deny spam with Lost Knowledge to like draw lots of cards and then spread out and try to scheme with like the Kruligans and the Night Terrors. That's like a really narrow specific strength, but she's great at that. That's like what I use her for.
So maybe I just haven't seen the spam list yet, and that might be decent. I feel like most of the masters I've been counting on as like really good in Malifaux burns do really well with spam lists, which is why we don't see them as much anymore. And I just don't know. I mean, the problem with Lost Knowledge really is that you got to be close. You got to be close to them, and 10 wounds on your master is a really low amount of wounds when you're
You gotta be
seeing-
8 inches from the marker research mission. The markers have to be on your side of the board anyway, because it has to be enemy, and that's what she's denying.
Yeah, so you can be 8 away from the midpoint.
8 away from a 40 mil, or 8 away
I
from
just-
whatever, I guess. 8
yeah.
away from the middle, yeah.
I'll disagree for one thing, and that's activation control. The way she gets it is by her activating, and then she can't deny research mission anymore. And that's because research missions always scored at like the very end normally, or is overscored. So I don't know. Deathbeds as well is more commonly done in just like one cycle now on most top tier masters. That it's
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I do agree with that. That's why I redacted as I was saying deathbeds. I agree
Yeah.
with that statement. But she,
I mean,
she
you're-
damn sure denies research mission like a pro.
Yeah, I mean, she just has to kind of go less, or I guess it makes it wonkier. I mean, that's a fair point. Yeah, just for you and for Cackle's sake, I'll put her in bottom of B.
Thank you, sir. We tip our hat to you.
Mostly because I get to do this. So I think I'm going to put my first D in.
Boop 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 boop.
I legitimately hate this master for a couple reasons that probably aren't true and definitely should probably make her in C. But like most of Resers, I'm going to let myself be talked out of this apparently. Arcane Reservoir is always an amazing ability. I love having a 7-card hand. That being said, she is very weird with the rest of her card. A very similar problem where she's still only 11 wounds. She lost kind of all of her defensive tech. So just has hard to wound and defense 5. So still very, prone to dying. Minus the whole protected shtick. But that's going to be interesting. Honestly, I should never put her in D because I don't think she's actually trash. But what she does is she moves her models around and tries to spam fading, right?
She has that one push ability, and then they can interact after they push. She's insane on symbols. Like, I should have taken her at the last tournament I was at on symbols. It would have been a much better business decision than what I did. But
yeah, giving a model focus and healing, it's nice. Deja Vu is a great trigger. She has a lot of card draw, and that's the best thing I can say about her. Is she is a resource god. I'm very actually impressed by the sheer amount of resource value she can generate. Even more so than the other version, because I actually just like having the card in my hand at the beginning. I like being able to focus heal and deja vu. You can pretend you're a Bokor. And I theoretically like her ability to push around her models. But she also is now basing her whole crew around discarding all those resources. And she kind of has to because she's forced into the forgotten keyword for the large part. And that keyword's kind of trash. So,
except for
all-
Night Terrors and Krulligans.
yeah, which are nice, but don't actually get to do that much, especially because Krulligans by your side, require a non-minion, and besides your master, you don't really have other good forgotten models you want to hire that aren't, more Krulligans and Night Terrors apparently. So she's always been in this like wonky kind of spot. And I don't know. I actually do think she might be my least favorite master in all of Resers, and I think probably in my mind the weakest one. Just because when I have seen her play, she dirtled, did a lot, and nothing happened, and then her whole crew died because they ended up discarding a lot of cards and then just not having resources, and then your master's 11 wounds, stat 5, and then just dies. Because even though if you're pitching for protected, you're now losing more cards, and those models are dying, and you're not keeping a lot of models nearby her because you're moving them away. And her keyword sucks. Can I have said that before? Yeah. So take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I was tempted to give her the D, but I think I'm gonna push it into C just because
Phrasing, dude.
yes, I'm always very careful with my phrasing, Doug. Anyways, because on the parade route, with the parade route interaction with Night Terrors is actually kind of insane. On a suitless 4, you push a Night Terror 5 inches, ignoring models and terrain. Then you push it another 5 inches. Then it interacts.
How you pushing it the second time? It's
Because the Walk with
activation.
Pride trigger requires them to discard a card
The
as a
fading
cost.
ability on
Oh,
the Night
sure.
Terror.
I got you now.
Yeah,
happens as a
on the
cost.
batty boy that everybody, counted out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's a cost, it happens before you you resolve the rest of the effects. So it's really neat. Like, that's a cool thing to do. That's
Let
kind
me
of
tell you
one.
why that doesn't work.
Oh,
It's an attack action, right?
yeah.
Models within 3 of a Night Terror have concealment, my dude.
That is true.
So you're on a neg flip for your attack with a TN. Sure, you might hit your 4, but like, you gonna risk that?
That is true. That actually makes me
So
kind
now
of
you're
salty
spending
about
like a
this.
stone to get around your neg
Yeah,
flip that
or
you
a
generated
focus. I
by
guess
yourself.
you could target yourself with positive reinforcement to
Yeah.
focus, but like, yeah, that makes me. I mean, okay, so that's actually kind of what I'm talking about.
On your
That's a
7
cool
TN.
ability, but even that you have to spend 2 AP because you have
Look,
to focus.
The parade route thing works because of Whisper is the main reason it works, because
Sure.
you could set it up to work with Whisper once.
I mean,
Now I have
like,
to waste my whisper cards.
Yeah.
just sort of like in general, just looking at Molly, that's a cool thing. But then you get past that and you're like, what else does this model actually do? Like, she has a bunch of cute little pushes. She can, because I mean, the obvious use case with leading baton is to slap one of your own models for 1 damage, trigger deja vu, and push them 3 inches. Like, 1 damage is a price I would pay to push a friendly model 3 inches and trigger deja vu. But all these cute little 3-inch pushes together are gonna maybe make up for the fact that, like, your crew is outside of Kruligans and Night Terror is pretty slow, and Kruligans and Night Terrors are so fast they don't even necessarily need the help. And so then we get back to kind of my core heuristic, which is, what does a bad Molly activation look like? And a bad Molly activation really looks like you don't do anything.
You deal 6 to your own model.
Yeah,
It's legitimately the first flip I ever did with Molly was leading baton, 6 damage my own guy, and just went, oh, okay, cool. I lost 4 severes and I killed my model. Great.
Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, so you can but like a bad, like, aside from really bad activations like that, a bad Molly activation is like you spend a master AP and hopefully flip or cheat a 7 to like gain 1 AP worth of effect on another model. You have an 8-inch aura that does not do anything immediately. And you push dudes around a little bit, or you simply miss with your, stat 5 melee attack. Like, there's a lot of ways that a Molly activation can be very bad. And there are ways it can be good, and she does generate a lot of resources. So I think you're more likely to get the good outcome than the bad outcome. But it's never really wowing me, and it makes me want to just play a crew that can scheme without having to invest a bunch of resources into scheming. So I think C is fine.
Yeah. I was actually really amused when you brought up the Night Terror thing. Just rather sniff glue. Because that was one of the cases I was going to put for why she makes C instead of B for me. Because she's got a couple of things that I really like. Like, Parade Route is a pretty good action. Right, like, transferring 2 AP at the same time is really good. And sometimes transferring more than 2 AP at the same time is really good. Honestly, if that action ignored concealment, she easily makes up to B for me. Just because, as you pointed out, you can push something 10 inches and have it interact. But right now, what you have to do that just seems really expensive. And she is really good at drawing cards. Like, if you use Remember the Lost and you have a forgotten model attack another forgotten model, you're probably just drawing a card, right? So like, she can make resources pretty well. But the Nambo with concealment within her own keyword on the best model to use it on in the keyword is just really annoying, I think.
Yeah, and it's like it's not that it's non-functional. It's just
And the
it's
fact that
annoying
it's
and makes
also
you
once per
put more
activation,
resources in.
the one thing that I really like about most AP transfer type abilities is that or pushes in general for AP transfers, that you can do it more than once, and you can't do this one more than once. So it's kind of just like getting the low end of the stick there. They try and make up for it with the interact, but I don't know that it quite gets there. I do like that she has a severe of 6, but she's stat 5, so you can't use it offensively very well. Like if she was stat 6, I would say her melee gets a bit more consideration for me as like being good, but there's just enough like small annoying bits on her card that make me struggle to put her into the B where I want her to be. So that's my thought.
I would like it if positive reinforcement had the crow built in.
She's hard trash. This is bad. Yeah, she's really bad.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like D, like definitely. I would never play this model right now.
All right. With the other Rezzers opinion, I'm definitely solid to put her in D now. I hate
Doug
this
is slipping her
model.
the D.
Dude,
She's
I
bad.
joked about it when
No,
she was
she's
revealed
bad.
that
She's
I would
bad.
leading baton 6 damage my own guy to get deja vu off, and then I fucking did it, and I was just like, I'm done. I'm never playing this master ever again.
This model's bad, bro.
High variance.
This model's bad compared to what this faction has accessible to them. This model's bad, bro.
All right, get on our case, Cackle.
Sorry, Cackle.
Prove us wrong. But yeah, no, I'm down. I'm definitely down to have our first D tier be Molly. I legitimately don't think I would ever play this model.
Like, is there a tier below D? Like, can we like a subterranean tier, perhaps?
Wong tier.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Long's probably
Hey,
okay now, right?
hey,
Whoa,
Wong can-
whoa,
no,
whoa, whoa.
we'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah.
She's bad, bro.
All right, cool. I'm glad to end it there. Like this model. Onwards to Von Schtook. Von Schtook got hit decently with the nerf bat. I think he's still pretty good, and that people are just not playing him as much anymore because of the instances of just, not being able to just easy faster guys, and some people's just lack of desire to ever hire sloth. And I still think he's pretty solid. Like his ability, I mean, Gruesome Lecture is just an amazing attack, and his card draw and his whole entire keyword's pretty amazing. Lecture upgrade is still really great. You're just not fasting with him anymore, and is that like the worst thing in the world? Probably not. Honestly, probably not. You can maybe do it once if you want. You don't want to spend too much time placing down scheme markers. I'm debating where I want him in A, but I'm pretty sure I want him in A. I don't think he'll ever go below A just because of how, like, the fact that his keyword is one of the best in Rezzers and all of his models are really good, and I don't think he can ever really be a bad model because of that. Like you nerf him a little bit, and then you just have to realize that, oh my god, having a arguably possibly better decay on his attack that also coincidentally just has a couple of suits built in just to potentially draw a card is pretty good. Not being able to get stunned, also really amazing. So this model will never be bad. I think maybe it's worse than Reva now, just because the edge case of the Master's turn might be just a little bit more sad, but overall, good God, his keyword's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking a bunch when we were talking about McMourning and when we were talking about Molly, and when we were talking about Reva, and when we were talking about Seamus. God, we did the 4 bad ones first about how bad the keyword is. Von Schtook's keyword is not bad. Von Schtook's keyword is absurd. Like, I would like to hire a bunch of models with cost +1 health and armor and hard to wound and good actions. Let me do that. Like, please, once in my life.
That draw me cards.
Yeah, that draw me a bunch of cards for no reason. So yeah, like this is just. It reminded me that there was somebody I was talking to about different types of Magic decks, and his definition of combo deck is an aggro deck that draws 8 cards a turn for no reason, and that's Von Schtook. It's a card. It's a deck, a crew that draws eight cards a turn for no reason. And he's basically, yeah, he's great. I think you pretty much nailed it. I never played against pre-nerf Von Schtook, so I don't know how horrible he was, but like he's really good. He's got a ton of health. He's got basically 2 armor a lot of the time. He has like a bunch of random stuff on his card, like academic superiority doesn't matter until it does. He has good attacks with good triggers. Yeah, he's good. A's, I have no problem with A.
Yeah, A's the place for him to be. Gruesome Lecture is still, even with the blast removed off of the weak, a really, really good attack. I can't like stress how much it is good that you have an attack that just kind of, if it hits once, the model you put it on is basically just dead. Like once you're on injured 2, you lose every duel and you die. That's true of most models in this game. And the fact that it also just has a blast so that sometimes it hits more than one model is really nasty. And a trigger just to get like focused on it, because why not? And 2 suits on it, so you almost always draw a card when you shoot this action. Like it's just really good. And then you can still do the fast stuff if you want, but I feel like Academic Broadcast and Gruesome Lecture are enough to just put this card in A tier, and then it has other stuff.
Yeah, you're no longer like wanting to always do the administrative review. Now you're just like, oh, I guess I will just hire Sloth, and then
And I guess one of my
realize
other
Gruesome
pet
Lecture's
peeves
OP.
is just that like he's got this trigger that's built in that just reduces damage by 2, and it's like, whoa, how do you stop models that have defensive triggers? Well, you stun them. Well, you can't gain stun, so it's like impossible to just kind of put damage into them unless you're playing like literally Thunders with the trigger upgrade. Even that doesn't work because he just turns off the upgrade, so he just has no counterplay except for like innately relentless models, which I think there might be like 2 of in the game. And they're both like not great models for hiring. So like there's my real pet peeves, is that this guy is freaking invincible and has just like good attacks and then hands out focus, right? In a model or a keyword that really likes focus, draws a bunch of cards. Like he's definitely solid. He's definitely A. I think that's as far as you can take it though.
Yeah. I all I know is Explorers. I would take Husks and Calypso against him, and that's how you
take
kill
Husks
him.
out of keyword.
Well, no, if I was Nexus, otherwise you just always had Calypso to deal with him.
I'd put him just like the bottom of A tier, basically, like the very rear end of A.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly where he is.
So like just to explain a little bit as to why he's the bottom of A for me, and not in S. Like he's a very fundamentals type master. Like everything that he's doing is not breaking the game in some manner. It's just like playing the game somewhat well. So he's like taking the very basics of like drawing cards is good, and doing damage is good, and having good defensive stats is good, and not really like playing with any special.
He's like a blocking
axis
and
on it.
tackling. He does blocking and tackling exceptionally well, like in
Yeah,
terms
exactly.
of value and damage output, basically. Yeah.
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 Agreed.
All right. Well, I guess with that agree, we'll go on to second form, which is just slightly better / different Schtook. I'll still put this below McMourning, but above Reva. Yeah, I don't know. His melee attack stuns can also just be min-3 if they're already stunned. As we talked about, stun is probably one of the best conditions in the game. It's ridiculously good. Study of Anatomy does some really wonky things that allows him to now scheme and strat probably as one of potentially the second best in Resers, which is nice. Being able to heal is always just a nice fallback, and his bonus action is nice to just turn off one of like the key models. So all in all, pretty good things on his card that allow him to be a schemier, more play around the board kind of master than his other form. And I think currently in this GG, that's GG2 for those who might listen later on, is currently better than his other form. You still get all the other great benefits of your whole keyword is amazing, draws you a bunch of cards, armor hard to wound. And then the Shade of Dilios is what really turns on Study of Anatomy, and also lesson learned is the big thing that really bumps him up above other Schtook, which is after you fail a duel, every other duel you make that activation is now at a plus flip. Um, that's just obviously a really good ability. If they're trying to just repeatedly hit you, you fail once, now you're at a plus flip for the rest of them. It's really nice. Your whole kit and caboodle is very nice. You're very hard to kill. And you're able to move your own models around kind of wherever you want. And yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would put him exactly where you've got him. I think Study of Anatomy is nuts. That ability is so much better than it looks, and it looks good. But yeah, also, why is Light of Ilios a Shockwave 3?
Yeah,
That just seems so needless to me.
Because it's only stat 11.
Oh no. Okay. It's still like that's a lot of cards you're making your opponent flip. That's how shockwaves end up doing stuff, is when your opponents have to flip a ton of cards. Also, it doesn't even matter if you hit any enemy models, you heal all your dudes. It's a big 3-inch pulse heal. So yeah, I think that he does have a lot of TNs on this card. And I mean, Light of Ilios is not a serious TN, but Astronomical Insignificance is a pretty serious TN. However, you're playing Transmortis, so you're drawing a million cards. Yeah, I mean, I think that he's great. I don't have that much more to say. He there's no actions on his card are bad. Like, even good models sometimes have bad actions on your card where you're like, oh, I'll just never do that. You will do everything on his card. They're all good.
And even if you I just want to point out one funny thing about the Astronomical Insignificance and its high TN and duel is if you fail it, you're not a plus flip for all of his other TN.
Yeah, it is enemy only, so you can't do the obvious thing of Astronomical Insignificancing your own model, failing, and then just making it a plus twist for all your attacks forever. So that's
but you can't just fail your 8 needed TN and do it through concealment to an enemy.
Yeah. It's also, you could just succeed
with
with it and deny your opponent points. Like, he has an action that directly converts to points on the board.
That's because Rather Sniff Glue.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool. So yeah, he's great. I think he's very, very good. He's cute in a lot of the stuff he does. He also, I think, feels less bad to play against than Schtook 1 because there's stuff you could do into him. So, but I think he's more powerful. But he's more fiddly and finicky. So, I don't know. Yeah, A. No problem with A.
I agree with A. I don't know that he feels more fair than Schtook 1 though. So to just break it down a bit, the whole thing of I think Transmortis in general is that they've got these great defenses, but you can eventually kill them. Like with Schtook 2, you get to hand out shielded on top of armor 1 hard to wound, which is basically just like a stat check. Does your faction have precise? If no, you don't kill any of my models this game. Because on top of that, you also then heal them. You don't heal them for a lot, but they don't ever take a lot of damage. Great side being that you can eventually kill Schtook himself, but after you hit him once, he also just gets plus flips defense. So it's pretty hard to keep him down. Then I haven't actually played into Schtook 2 personally yet, but I know some people who really, really like him, and I think it's pretty obvious why they like him. Study of Anatomy is just such a really good ability. It just does so many things when you use it, because there's not a Transmortis model, I feel like, that has fewer than 2 keywords, and then you just give them a third, sorry, not keywords, characteristics, and you just give them a third of whatever you need to do. And here we go. This is the model that you can play with Reva 2, get shielded out on stuff, chosen Luminary on your valedictorian. It goes in there, it takes 4 attacks or whatever, and then it's min 3, severe 6, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, that does sound fun, actually.
Yeah,
I want to try that now.
With the shielded too, they have to hit it twice before the shielded pops off. It's pretty good. So yeah, I definitely agree with A. Is there anything else I forgot to kind of go over? Oh yeah, the mindless zombie summoning is also really cute. So he's got a good melee beat stick. I think he's a good pivot for Von Schtook 1 versus 2, kind of like how you want to play him. I think Von Schtook 1 plays a bit back more, whereas this one plays a bit more forward. But you certainly can play this one back with a 10-inch range on Study. So I don't know. And then he also gets around the attack's like biggest weakness of being a 10-inch range attack that doesn't ignore concealment by just gaining plus flips if you do it twice.
Also,
So-
just dropping range scheme markers is obviously really good.
Oh yeah, for sure. I thought we went over the fact that he drops a freaking scheme marker instead of a shockwave marker on Light of Ilios. But if we didn't, my bad.
Yeah, I mean that just makes study of anatomy work.
Yeah.
Like that's why that happens. It's
and
a study
score
of anatomy
points.
function.
Like,
And
I mean,
score points,
they
yeah,
obviously
that's
could have just made shield like a corpse marker or something that doesn't also coincidentally score points. Like, I think that's the slightly more of the annoying things.
Yeah, so he's definitely good. I think we placed him correctly.
Is that the word of the Pope?
That's the word.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's correctly placed. I think the biggest thing with him is that he's a big brain master. And what I mean by that is this guy in my mind, more than most of the other masters we've talked about and will talk about, rewards really depth of knowledge and tons of reps with this particular guy because he's capable of so many different lines of plays and doing so many different things. And I think if you become incredibly good with this particular master, you can take some crazy lines of play, which are interesting. And I think the other guy that's true for is the gentleman currently right in front of him in the A tier right now as well. So I think that is categorically a thing that is often associated with very high level masters, because high level skill players are going to want to seek these masters out because ultimately they're going to say, I can make, 4 right decisions every activation, which is my fast action and my 3 primaries. And you're basically bidding that you are making those perfect decisions because that's how you're going to get the most power out of those masters, which I think is why we see these float to the topper tiers on these lists, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much Schtook. I guess we also didn't like the -1 to willpower duels against his crew is also really nice. I think I don't know if we mentioned that, but that's just a nice little gravy on top to being hard to attack.
I
But
mean,
yeah.
it's mostly on him. That's a very small aura. But yeah, sometimes it matters.
Yep. Moving on. Let's just jump right into Kirai. Kirai 1 is okay. She can summon Guixin, which is, a pretty huge buff to her. Just because of how amazing Guixin are. Overall, GG2 is not the most summoner friendly schemes and strats, especially because of the way we treat summons and them getting the summon token. So that always makes me like not the biggest fan of most hard dedicated summon ones, especially when you want to use summons to go off to the outskirts. So having the Guixin be a good like stand next to me, be a little bit tanky, is decently nice. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of Kirai 1 overall. She's definitely decent. Her crew can be pretty interesting. And yeah, I don't know. Keeping adversary Urami on models, it really is the most interesting part about her card, I think, and really enables her crew to do some interesting things. But I feel like Incorporeal's not as good as it used to be because most ping damage is coming from abilities, and we're seeing more irreducible, which is making her crew a little bit more sad. So for that, I will put her above Maul. I'll actually put her above Doll. I think she's a pretty solid in the B. Just being incorporeal, as we talked about, Resur's not doing great with severe terrain. She's obviously the crew that just does it. So that's always pretty nice. And I think no matter what, summoning will never be bad overall, and it does some rather interesting things. The rest of her card is, pretty fine. Just heal and focus some people. Give them shielded. Do whatever. I got your back is always good, but not the greatest bonus action to have on a master.
Yeah, I mean, I think B is fine. It's really how you feel about summoners. She has defense 4, but she does have protected, so that helps. I think that there's some stuff on her card that's kind of like pulling in multiple directions. Like on the one hand, she wants to be pretty close to the enemy so she can get life lead, so she can get I've got your back. so she can summon her spirits in range. On the other hand, if she's that close, she's defense 4, and so you're pitching a ton of cards to protect it, or she's gonna just die. So there's trade-offs. But mostly I think she's just like sort of the platonic ideal of a Malifaux summoner. So if you like playing summoners, you are going to really enjoy playing her. If the scheme and strategy pool is set up such that you can play a summoner, so it's like a ley lines type situation, and then you can get away with that. If the pool is kind of hostile to summoners, like symbols, maybe you don't play her. Not much more to say beyond that. I'm saving it all for her title.
Sure. I think that B is a perfectly respectable place to put her. She's kind of got a tool in the box for every situation that she needs to, but I don't think she makes it to A for me for a specific reason, in that she doesn't actually really have any good scheme runners in particular. Despite being the faction, or not the faction, the keyword that can ignore terrain, she doesn't have anything that can really get into position and put out scheme markers. She can do one or the other pretty reasonably, but not both. She does, however, have, I think, the best denial in the faction now, with the ability to summon a Guishin and then have the Guishin walk over and just Trail of Gore your marker, and you're like, what now? So I almost want to put her in A just because Guishin are really dumb summons. Like,
Yeah, but they got
categorically.
nerfed, so she goes in B.
I don't even care. They didn't nerf the important part, that you can just like summon, what is it, the 6-inch range on the summon, and then walk twice and then pick up a scheme marker with your bonus and then take an attack. Like, that's what, denial of a marker from 19 inches away if you don't walk Kirai beforehand. Like, that's pretty gross. And
Yeah.
then obviously, as we've probably all know at this point in time, the ability to just pop an Akirio out and just force irreducible damage onto your opponent. She has really high variance though, because she's an incredibly resource intensive crew that generates no resources. And that's, I think, what really stops me from putting her in A, is that her card burden is incredibly huge, and she doesn't have any really good ways to mitigate that. So if your opponent has ways to punish you for not having good cards, you just kind of crumple. And that's my thoughts on Kirai. So speaks the Pope.
So saith the Pope. My thought is that she is the very front of B, and let me explain why. I will do so now. So the way that I think of her is she is really good at the specific strength that she has, at least when I take her to the table now, which is summoning either Gueshin, Shikome, or Gorios, depending on what my whisper trigger tells me is the most effective thing to do at the time, basically. And I always hire. You guys were talking about how Gueshins are great summons. They're also great hires. I just hire 2. I always hire at least 2. Sometimes I hire 3. And then I'm just hunting to get like a Shikome or a Gorio on turn 1, and I just throw it at people. And I don't really care as much about scheming with it. I'm just murder facing things with those guys, basically. And the Gueshin are awesome anti-schemers as well, because they have Trail of Gore on them. So they're just insane. So the fact that she has those now as minions, which can also score things like catch and release, is just like great. Also, the enslaved spirits are still in keyword for her as well, aren't they? I think.
Yeah, they are
Yeah.
her keyword, and there are very strong models.
This is all in keyword synergy. So she still has in keyword synergy with all of the adversary tech on all of this stuff. It's not like you're taking them as versatiles, which I also do because they're so strong. But they're at home here, and they're insane minion hires. They're just by themselves. They're insane. Like, you could even just put. I've done some games where I saw Jacob from Boring Conversation do this. Shout out to him. And I started doing it. You put Grave Spirit's Touch on a Gueshin, or like 2 Gueshin that you hire. So you hire 2 Gueshin and you put Grave Spirit's Touch on both of them. Oh man, somebody's gonna have a bad day at the office, and it's probably gonna be the person across the table from you.
I've
Like-
one-shot a lot of Guishin with Grave Tear's Touch.
Yeah, I'm not. I
rude.
have to admit, I'm not the
I like
biggest fan
seeing that
of
8 points across
as
the
well.
table.
Rude. First of all, rude. Second of all, rude. That's fine
Yeah.
though.
It honestly, Grey Spirit's Touch, I'm not the biggest fan of putting on Guishin, just because when you want to kill him, you want to do it in one big shot anyway. So
Yeah,
Regen 2 is not the
but not
greatest.
everybody knows that, right? So
If you're playing competitively,
yeah, they probably do. That's true.
Yeah, it's
All right.
it's very true that she. I mean, the Guishin are is just ridiculous.
I think she's top of B. I don't think she's A. I don't think she makes A, but I would make a case that she's the top of B. Definitely better than the Seamuses, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I just want
Uh,
to briefly go
I'll
back
do that. That
on
doesn't bother me. I don't like
Guishin.
Seamus anyways.
I think they're really excellent 6-point minions. I think even with GST, they're only okay 8-point minions. And so like what really I like about
Even
them
naked.
going to
Even
hire
naked.
them is that they're efficient.
Yeah, you just hire them naked and they're super efficient for their points
Mhm.
value, even if you
Yeah.
don't want to put Spirit's Touch on them. You know?
I just think Spirit's Touch is what like breaks the whole these are efficient models now and puts them into the these are just kind of okay models. Like their biggest strength is just that they're cheap and that they, are annoying.
Yeah,
And Trail of Gore.
Yeah, as I was about to say, I think Landon's Trail of Gore analogy, like how far out you can actually just decide to pick up a scheme marker, does actually really make it a lot better in my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So I'll put him above the Seamuses, mainly because I don't like the Seamuses, but also because, God, just being able to summon Guishin after they're dead is just amazing.
And Shikome, man. Like, you summon a Shikome and you just send it to kill something. And that
Yeah,
thing
there's a
will
lot
kill
of
it.
models in this game that I hate hiring and love summoning.
Shikome
and
are awesome
Shikome
to
are
summon.
up there.
They're so good to summon. Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
They're really fast. They have a really good statted attack. The second they kill something, they become insane. So you can send them after a squishy flank runner, and then they just become a killing machine with
Yeah.
puncture and ignore armor on a stat 6.
Yeah. So yeah, being able to, as you were saying, like hire your couple Guishin, maybe even 3, summon the Shikome, and then just summon whatever dies.
Yeah, and you use
Afterwards.
intuition. You use your intuition trigger at the top of your turn to dictate what your summon track becomes, so that you don't have to have a card expenditure from a volume standpoint, which is her main weakness. So you just put that on her, and you're like, I don't really care what I summon because all of these things are great. I'll just kind of morph my turn around that, unless you need to make a real specific business decision about something that has to die with a particular thing. But like most of the time, it doesn't really matter if it's a Goryo or a Shikome or even a Guishin. They're all insane. You just take whatever the deck gives you.
Yeah. Yeah, the main thing holding her back from being any higher always is the fact that the rest of her card doesn't do too much, and she really is just kind of stay back, and after you get your summon off, you just go, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but
What about
top of B.
second summon?
Oh, as a second master. Oh, she's in my opinion, she's the S tier second master of the faction. In my opinion, I love her
Yeah,
as a
I
second
can
master.
definitely see that because none of her stuff is leader restricted,
Yep.
and
She just makes him up. She just
You just
makes
summon
a-
the Akiryo
although
turn
is
one.
the upgrade leader restricted?
I think you can't summon a Curio if you're second master.
Well, so you don't want too many of these upgrades on her because she's going to die real fast unsupported. So the ideal scenario for her as a secondary master is you try to hit big.
No, you're right. You can't summon the Akiryo if she's second master. No.
You're just making the Goryos and the Shikomes with her. I basically make Shikomes as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I also think none of us really talked about the
Yeah.
Akiryo, but that is a big part of her power budget that she comes with and can infinitely resummon just an irreducible attacker with Onslaught.
Yeah.
I thought I
Good,
touched
good.
on it, but yeah, the fact that the reason why I think she's got a bit more flexibility than the title, which I'm sure we'll get into and you guys will flame me, is the fact that you don't have to jump through hoops to make an Akiryo, you just do it. And that's
Yeah,
really good.
It just kind of happens.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like being able to just summon the Akiryo. That being said, though, I don't feel like the Akiryo helps this crew out as much as the other version because sometimes you actually do just want, as we were saying, like the Guishin to go off and eat the markers, or you even would just rather have like a Shikome who can fly away faster.
But
Not much faster. but,
I think where we're all landing is she's the top of B, which is where we have her. I think it's right.
And then we'll move on to Kirai 2, who is kind of just bonkers strong in very specific things, but I think is surprisingly weak in others that most people are catching on as we play her more. I played her a lot after she came out. Once I got all the rules that I was playing wrong corrected and started playing her legally, I started noticing like her big weak points. I'm leading up all in this because I know a lot of people honestly expect me to put her in S because they hate playing against a model. They get so hard tilted by it and how much soul stones you summon off of the summons. That being said, I think I put her a little bit below McMourning now, and almost below von Schtook maybe. I'm going to go over a few reasons why I think this, just because I know a lot of people will have different opinions.
Yeah, I want to hear what
is-
you were doing wrong, because that might be something a lot of people are doing wrong.
Yeah, so for me, the big thing I was doing wrong was Swirling Spirits. You have to end within 8 of her, and you can't just push 5. I don't know why I just didn't read the last couple words of the sentence, but I did. And that makes a world of difference for turn 1 stuff. A huge world of difference for turn 1 shenanigans. So you have to put a lot more effort into movement. You have to move her further up the board, and she's a lot more easy to get killed. Because she doesn't have the pass off. And I that was one of like the big things I was playing wrong. That small change actually is the reason why she almost falls out of S for me, because she does need, I think, those extra, I mean, potentially 5 inches, how I was playing it, in order to really make the crew work. That being said, her benefits are obviously really good. Being able to summon enslaved spirits, even though you're not controlling it really, is you're still normally generating enough of the TN duels that it's pretty consistent you're going to see them, or they lose their whole hand, which is also, pretty good. Revenge, being able to get her people at negative flips, is what's really going to allow you to start doing the Join Us ability. It's just slapping someone with Adversary Urame. You get that. The ability to give a model Adversary Urame on a stat 7 range 12 bonus action is pretty amazing, because you don't really have too many reliable ways. Otherwise, you're kind of relying on maybe Guoxin's ranged attack to do it, or killing a model and having it explode on them, but that's not great. So your stat 7 really is your best way to do it. And other than that, Anchored Reality is a nice trick you can start trying to pull off, but it's not that reliable to shuffle around the healing. Ghostly Presence is just really nice, especially with Whisper, to just be able to turn crows into other suits is really amazing. But the main bread and butter is the sheer fact that you're able to summon a lot of small little totems, which are really nice. Summoning your Curio is also really good. It does kind of getting more expensive, because I was saying you really do kind of need to land your bonus action and then hit the trigger on it, and then all you need after that's an 8, which is very nice. And because it's a tactical action, you don't care about concealment, so you're only worried if they have ways to put you at negatives. Which I don't actually, can they? Yeah, I guess it would. As long as it's not attack actions. I don't know how many of those there are, but either way, the next bread and butter is the Sundering, which is once you start stacking up all these minions, and Ikirio does count as a minion, so him as well, around a model, you're able to just do infinite scaling damage. It has no cap. I have legitimately dealt 8 damage to models on like moderates, or even potentially a min. It's not, if they're a big 50 mil base, it's not like actually unreasonable to get almost 6 minions around them sometimes in some pretty hilarious fashions. I'm a big fan of hiring her with Madame Sybil. That buff made it really good. The whole Red Chapel keyword is pretty nice, but Madame Sybil being the big fat tanky one, who can get moved forward with Enslaved Spirits, which work really well in this crew, because they can, have 3 movement as well as moving another model. That's all movement to go through a model. But the weaknesses are pretty clear. The crew's very frail overall. Most of the summons are low wounds, and people can take advantage of that, sometimes getting potential benefits from killing things. Swirling Spirits not being able to go outside of 5 really does mean you have to get Kirai more forward, and Kirai can just die. You have the Guoxin to try to keep her alive, but most top tier masters or top things you're playing against have ways of moving you around, or ways of dealing with other things. Line of sight blocking is sometimes gets interesting. And it's just like, I played it enough where I'm pretty confident that she can beat almost any master that's like not S tier. And that's the reason I'm not going to put her in S tier, because most masters she can just almost always consistently beat. are the ones who aren't the absolute top. And the absolute top of Malifaux right now, I do think outvalue this Kirai in a very weird way. And that's my long spiel on Kirai.
Okay.
It's surprisingly not. It's ridiculously strong, just slightly weaker than I think the other top tier masters.
All right. So I respect you as a player. You are on crack. She's an easy S. She's like one of the easiest S's in the game. Like you yourself close this out by saying like she will almost always beat everyone else who's not an S. To me, that means S. But like if you want me to analyze it, she summons an absolutely insane amount of free models every turn. No, with the like. So Malifaux, like all war games, is essentially a game of resource management and can convert and like good conversion of resources. You convert cards to wounds, you convert wounds to points, you convert activations to points, you convert soul stones to removed models. That's what you're doing. You have a certain number of resources in the game, and you are converting those resources into other resources with the end goal of ending up with the most of a certain resource, that being points. Kirai does so much without the investment of any resources at all. Like, let's look at Thirst for Vengeance and the Akirio. For the cost of a High Mask or a Soul Stone, and one card that costs 8 or more, you just summon an Akirio every single turn. And yeah, she's staggered, but that's the condition that matters the least when you're summoned into base contact with an enemy model. So you're converting her bonus action, which is something that in other masters, let's just, by the way, looking at other masters' good bonus actions, it's things like original Kirai is sometimes pull an engaged model out like about 6 inches. This one is generate a really good 8-stone model. She summons huge amounts of spirits with absolutely no investment of resources on your part whatsoever. And what really puts it over the top to me is that because you can summon enslaved spirits with Chain Gang, your summons snowball into each other. So once you start, you're like playing against Kirai feels like walking on a tightrope, where as long as you can stay on top of Join Us, you have a chance. Because she's still doing a master's worth of stuff.
Once
she's
you
still
lose one,
yeah, she's still shooting you with like an insanely strong ability, which by the way doesn't even have a gun. Sundering doesn't have a gun, so you don't get cover against it. You don't get, you can't engage her to make her stop doing it. Not that you even could, because she could just walk the other world to get out of engagement whenever she wants to. Yeah, you're just doing like huge uncapped range damage. You have like random defensive tech, like for on a suitless 5, you can heal yourself or another model and then have concealment for the rest of the turn. You're summoning all this crap that your opponent can't deal with, and then just her front of card is just insane. Like, if you can hand out Adversary Urami, which her whole crew can do, and also she can do on a stat 7 on willpower, you're just at a straight up minus twist to hit her. So you can generally pick one model per turn to just not have to worry about. You can spread healing around, and her whole crew heals. And when they, under some circumstances, like most of them have that ability to heal the master when they kill a model. Well, now can heal anyone. The fact that she now allows Akirio to trigger Onslaught on fully 50% of the cards in your deck is a little silly. It also means that she can do Hateful Instinct on fully 50% of the cards in your deck. Like I say, you need a High Mask. You don't. You need a High Mask or Crow.
50% of the cards you flip.
Sure.
It's a huge difference, a massive difference.
Wait, no. What do you mean?
he's saying that it only works on cards that you flip, not cards you cheat out of your hand for that Crow ability.
I don't
that's
know that.
Oh wait,
not
no,
what it says.
I'm thinking of a different ability. Never
Yeah,
mind. I'm
that's-
thinking of a different ability.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the other one. I think.
Yeah.
you're-
That's not
Never
what it
mind.
says.
I'm thinking of a different one.
She just like, yes, she's beatable. Like, I don't think the standard for not being an S tier should be like capable of losing a game. She's definitely capable of losing games. There's stuff, and other S tier masters are the ones who are best positioned to do that. But really, if she's fighting against someone who's not an S tier, it's an uphill battle for them. And even if they're capable of staying on top of the just absurd amount of summoning from Join Us, she just does a bunch of other stuff too. And that's really what ultimately I think puts her from A to S to me, is that she has this incredible crew defining ability that doesn't require any investment of cards or AP or soul stones. And then while you're dealing with that, she just has a master's card worth of abilities. And so that's, Kirai is an S for me. and it's not particularly close. I don't think she's the only or best S in the faction, which is just more of a testament to how good Rezzers are, but she's an S.
I'll make another point later if no one else makes it. But Landon, take it away because I think you're on
All
my
right,
side on
I'm
this
ready
one.
to get flamed. I'm gonna get flamed by you.
Don't do it,
I'm gonna
Pope.
get flamed by
Don't
the
do it,
internet.
Pope.
I'm gonna get
Don't do
fucking
it.
flamed by
Even
my
lower?
dad and disowned. I'm putting her in B. Have you considered just sniffing glue and playing Rezzers? That would solve a lot of your problems, really, actually. And so I didn't want to write an essay about this, but apparently I have to. So I'm gonna start with I don't think she scores points well. We're gonna go back to the same reason I don't like Kirai 1 enough to put her in A. It's the same reason I don't like Kirai 2 to put enough in A. Like the only really good way you have of getting markers in position with this Kirai is, using enslaved spirits, and that requires your opponent to be failing duels and for you to be popping out enslaved spirits, and then for those enslaved spirits to be dying in exactly the right take or place. So like there's enough what ifs there that you just aren't reliably scoring points, and none of the models that you have available to hire in keyword are particularly good at scoring points. And if you aren't playing in keyword, you're not leveraging the advantages you get by declaring Kirai. So while Rezzers do have good out of keyword like schemers, I don't think she leverages them particularly well and is much weaker if you hire them. So point 1, I think she's not good at scoring. Point 2, yeah, great bonus action. You can pop out in a curio, but I'll point out she has the same flaw that Kirai 1 has. You don't generate resources. You don't have a ton of resources. So like you have to land your attack, which is usually going to require a high, moderate, or severe, and then have another 8 for Vengeance Incarnate. And you just aren't always going to have those cards. So like you get some high variance introduced there. And like adds concealing on top of that or something, and then you're spending more AP to do this, right? Or just like what's the thing that says you can't take bonus action? If you're stunned, you never get to do this. Or if you have like a chatty or whatever, there's places to interact with Kirai that I think definitely keep her out of S for me. But like that only puts her into A, right? The not scoring points well is what puts her really into B for me. In pools where you can get away with not scoring points, she's really, really, really strong. Like if you got claim jump, whatever garbage where everyone has to come to the center or interact with your models or fight you. Like, and that's a very specific strength to me. Like, not a universal strength. Like in pools where you have to spread out, she loses so much just by virtue of not having a single model that can score points well independently. Like Chikome, they might be fast and they might fly, but they get one shot by basically all good aggressive models in the game right now. Not having like hard to wound or like good defensive mitigation. Most of your models they have incorporeal, but they start with below wounds unless they're like Guixin. But even Guixin can get one shot by a lot of the good aggressive models in the game right now. So like your gimmick with healing doesn't necessarily work if you never have anything to heal. So like Longton kind of said, I think she loses out a lot when you're starting to compare her to the actual top of metagames. I think she definitely pub stomps well, like in games where people don't know how to just score points, or she pub stomps really well in like pools where your opponent is forced to play the game that Kirai has to play. But by the definition of how we have defined our tiers, I think that it is impossible for me to put her anywhere other than B because she is not universal enough to be played everywhere.
So you're saying you're talking about how she has a hard time scoring, and I think you kind of glossed over enslaved spirits, given that they have a built-in trigger on their melee attack and just a trigger that, again, 50% of the cards in your deck hit on a ranged attack that just gives them a soul stone or a scheme marker rather. Just turns them into a scheme
that
marker.
scheme marker in every pool doesn't necessarily translate directly to points, right? It's never scoring you strategies. Then you have to, once again, for most schemes in GG2, either like if we're playing Deathbed, you need to have another marker. Her crew doesn't make another marker. Doesn't even drop like corpses or anything. If we're playing Spread Them Out, you have to spread them out, which you just can't do with Enslaved Spirits. Detonate, you can try, but it feels a bit more like you have to have a lot of them to do that. And it's very difficult for you to get the second scheme marker out unless you just kill 2 enslaved spirits and then you're dropping models. in your like swarmy model, and your opponent still might just have counterplay to it. What other scheme marker schemes can I think of in the current gaining grounds that they don't really help with? Just pull out your
Basically all of
breakthrough.
them. Yeah.
I mean, you have to get your models away from enemy models in their deployment zone to score breakthrough. You are pretty much always going to have your models on top of enemy models in this crew. So you never get the reveal point of breakthrough. You might get the end if you kill enough spirits in their deployment zone and they never remove your markers, but I don't feel like that happens, right? I think she's just pretty bad at scoring points. And you're, of course, never scoring outflank. And you're certainly not going to be using enslaved spirits to score bait and switch, I don't think. Maybe you will, maybe you, but like, I don't know. It's, again, dependent entirely on your opponent to let you do that, right? So I don't think you can leverage enslaved spirits for points particularly well.
I just think you're underrating a bit just how difficult it is for your opponent to interact with you when they're like having to spend resources and AP, just like preventing themselves from getting drowned in a tide of these spirits.
I mean,
Like-
I've played against it in tournaments before. I'm not particularly as impressed by it as you are, I guess. Like, and maybe that's just my Thunder privilege shining through as having like Charm Warders the end all be all for that matchup question. But like,
yeah, I have played
I
against
think
her.
there's enough there.
I had a good time with playing against her with Brewmaster too. I think that's a great matchup for me, and I didn't really have a problem with it. But I've played against her with other crews, and it just has felt miserable trying to stay
And
on
I think
top of
that
that.
might just be part of the pools, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think she has really good pools where she gets close to being unbeatable, right? And she has really
What
good
would you
matchups
say
where
are
she's
her
close to being
absolute best
unbeatable.
pools then, Landon? Like where she really
I
shines?
don't know, like
She needs
flame
assassinate.
jump,
You
let them
want hidden
bleed,
martyrs.
assassinate, martyrs, yeah, like just things that require your opponent to interact with your crew to score points.
Yeah, 100%. I'm literally with Landon on all this. I have a few other things I want to say, but I want to let Doug go first so I can address them all. But there's a couple of reasons I put her in A over B based off of my play style that I'll argue against Landon's points. But
All right.
I
So,
want
like,
to
if
hear
we were
Doug's
just raw
opinion.
power,
I
would
mean, that
be
was a
with
Popey-
you
that
guys
was a-
in like A or S, but like
that was a
that's
spicy
my
address.
analysis.
No, that was a spicy address by the Pope. But is that the word of the Pope?
That's the word.
All right. I would. So I've played her a lot, Haku. I don't know, maybe a little bit less than you, but I probably have like 15 reps on her, maybe 16 reps on her. I've played her a good amount since she's come out, and I played her at a bunch of tournaments and stuff. Very similar list through what I've seen you play as well. Also, so I mean, I do think she's at, I think at least the top of A. I think she's better than the other McMourning, but I don't think she breaks. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think she breaks into S tier because even I admit there are pools that I look at and I'm just like, I'm not going to take her. She's just not good. And in my mind, an S tier master is something where I almost don't even look at the pool. I'm just like, yeah, it's fine. I can play whatever. Like, I'll just play it. Like, it's good. Like, this past weekend, I went to a local, and at my local, like, I was like, I'm gonna play max 2, solo her, regardless. It doesn't matter. I'm just playing this master, and I did, and I got third, and I did really well. But like, you can't do that with a master that has blind spots, like significant blind spots. And I definitely admit that although Kirai 2 is incredibly powerful, and I would define her as like suffocating. It's a slow, grindy, suffocating value game that she plays, which I think Sam was describing, where your opponent just needs to discard cards at a velocity to just stay on top of not breaking the dam. Because the second that I get an enslaved spirit out, you know that I'm going to chain gang across your shit and force lots of other movement. And if you failed your first one, odds are that you're probably going to start to fail others, and then I'm going to start to get gawky, or even more enslaved spirits, or the little Healy guys. I forget what they're called. Little dubers.
Sensation.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty much all the reason I have A. The other big reasons, and I'm going to get to it right now, and I'll make this point after I make the counterpoint to Landon, is you're right. Kirai doesn't score points. That's not how you win with Kirai, though. And I know, like, me saying that in particular is kind of obvious because I almost never win by scoring points. I try to win the game pretty much by like killing my opponent. I'm normally the biggest fan of kill your opponent, score later. Kirai does that in just an unimaginable level most of the times. Like, maybe not even completely killing them, but making sure that they can almost never move because they have all these models engaging them.
Yeah. You know, it doesn't
Um,
matter. Scoring points when your opponent is drowning in 15 of your
Yeah.
models and has lost a bunch of models and is taking damage every time they interact with you because of vengeance.
Yeah, so a lot of the time, that's the reason why she's not in B for me, because you can actually play her in like quote unquote bad pools just because against certain factions, it doesn't matter. She can just drown them out, make it so they can't move around, make it so that they're just not dropping scheme markers, and when they are, you're just picking them up with Guishin, and they're just sad. And the reason she's not an A or even or S or even higher A for me, like I almost want to put her below Schtook sometimes, is because she gets hilariously hard countered by particularly Resers, Lovelace Gravity Well plus Vincent just being able to stone execute her Akirio, make it like super depressing. So Gravity Well obviously just stops her summons. So you run into the same problem against them hiring Eric in Outcast. You run into a similar problem as Landon was talking about with Charm Warders in 10 Thunders and a few other mechanics in 10 Thunders, like ignoring Corporeal or just mostly Charm Warders and how obnoxious that bonus action can be. Then you're running into the execute problems in Guild with Lone Marshal. And I think Guild also just handles her really easily with someone, for example, like Sonya, who just drops the pyro markers. She severes. If she severes one of these guys, her blast drop the pyro marker kills all of the summons. Like it's shockingly easy for her to wipe up pretty much her whole crew, Kirai's whole crew. So while if you don't play against almost like specifically those things, Mayhoff obviously are both problems in Arcanist. If you don't play against specifically those things, yeah, you can just trash run over people. But the fact that you're like, man, they declared Resers, can't declare Kirai. Oh, they declared Outcasts. Ugh, do I really want to run the risk of getting against like Von Schiele, who's pretty good right now? Probably not. And against Guild, you're like, oh god, they took Sonya or Lone Marshal, Lady J. Like, oh, I don't know. And that's why she can never be S. Like, she'll never be
but I think
terrible
she's
against
the
them,
front end of
except for
A.
Resers.
I believe she's the very front end of A.
Before we move on, I just want to put out one last little detail that I was expecting you to go over and like we played this wrong type territory. But I seem to recall that if you want to summon something with Join Us, you also have to have line of sight to Kirai, which a lot of people might just gloss over.
Yes.
No, you do. That is that
Yeah,
you
I think
definitely do.
I think you do.
So that's also just an area where she can have weaknesses, especially if you're taking her to ignore like terrain, is that she has to, as herself, a model that does not ignore terrain, get through some stuff in order to actually make sure
But she
you
has
can
a
use
pretty
Join Us.
trivially easy to hit trigger to be able to push herself as an incorporeal model herself.
She's
So
not an
She's
incorporeal model
not
now,
ink,
dude.
but yes.
No, I'm saying
ignores
she can make her
terrain,
the walk with worlds
Oh,
trigger.
the ignoring, sure.
Yeah.
That's fine, but it's just another thing you have to invest then in your crew that doesn't generate resources well.
Yeah, I think that you are right. I really should have pointed it out because that is another thing I know a lot of people played wrong early, even me, was the Join Us requires line of sight to the summon. So you don't need it to the model, you need it to the summon, I believe.
Yeah, because it's part of the core
Yeah.
rules. You always need line of sight to stuff you summon.
And yeah, the only reason I don't put her at top of A and almost want to put her near the bottom of A in Resers, I know it's not because of like, it's just because she's hard countered by Resers. Like you can't play her into Resers, period. It's brutal. So I'm not gonna listen to Landon because I do think me and Landon obviously we have pretty different play styles. I do actually think the suffocation play style works really great for Kirai. So you don't need to rely too much on your own scoring because you can decently rely on them not scoring strat / their own schemes. And you can just free run most strats.
Hey man, I'm not even asking for S tier. I'm just asking for a little jiggle to
No.
the left there. Come on.
I legitimately think the fact that McMourning can be played against every faction and every pool makes her literally just better than Kirai. And that's why I'm almost leaning to putting her below Schtook because they can do the same thing. They're not hard limited by factions.
Do it.
Don't do it. No, don't listen to Landon.
Ah!
No. Come on now.
I actually will
Come
put
on.
him below Schtook 2, just because I actually do think the fact that Schtook 2 doesn't care about is also a pretty good counter against Kirai, and doesn't care about what faction and what pool you're really playing into.
I think theoretically, I think from a pure like theorycraft standpoint, if you are putting her in, if you're putting McMourning in front of her, then you should also put von Schtook in front of her for the same reasons.
Yeah,
To
so
be
I
totally-
will actually
To
do
be
that.
totally fair, if you're making the decision that one of those is in front of her, then they kind of, in my mind, are both in front of her. But if you think that she's better than one of those, then they should kind of both be behind her. You know?
Yeah.
Which is what I'm saying. That's why I think she should be the front. You know?
I actually will put it behind her for that reasons, because I mean, especially Von Schtook, who inherently hires Lovelace. You just slot in Vincent, which you
Yeah.
have no problem with, and now you're just like, oh fuck, what do? I can't play Kirai. I have to go play Kirai 1. I mean that's the thing that saves her. It's like, oh god, I ran into this X specific matchup. Playing Kirai 1 doesn't blow me out too much in that scenario.
Yeah, I think from a theory standpoint, yeah, I actually think you're right. So.
Yeah, if she didn't have Kirai 1 to follow back and high B, I actually almost would be with Landon and putting her in B, because if you do hit that matchup, you're like, oh cool, I just lose the tournament now.
Yeah.
All
right. The
Maybe
old
that's just
grandpa.
because I don't play
Settle it?
Resers, so I don't get to hard counter her. I hate dealing with
What
this
fact? Yeah,
freaking-
what faction?
I mean,
are
I
you,
He
mostly
plays
play
Bayou and ES.
yeah.
Bayou has pretty bad willpower, so that's
Yeah,
definitely
as you were
a
saying,
consideration.
Brew obviously can do some nice things.
Yeah,
against her,
Brewmaster
but
2 could
that is
walk
if
right
you're
over
if you
her.
don't specifically pick Brew, you are kind of like SOL.
Yeah.
Because wait,
Brewmaster can just remove
how
an
many
arbitrary
gravity
number of
wells
spirits.
exist in the game? There's two, right?
Just those
There are
two.
two.
There's two.
Yeah.
There's one on
And gravity wells an aura,
Ariak?
so
I
line
forget
of
how to
sight
pronounce
becomes
his
an
name, but-
issue.
Oh,
Eric.
quasi 3 now because Marcus too,
Oh yeah, Barkus.
He's
in two factions.
Barkus.
who is in 2 factions, yeah, and is a fine second master.
And then you still don't want to declare into Thunders because Charm Orders are just good.
Yeah, but against Explorers, against Gremlins, that's not Brew. Against hitting the correct master in guild, like I mean, it's the simple fact that you can fall back on Kirai 2 is what saves her. Because if you do hit the good matchups even in those factions, you're pretty content. And Eric's not amazing in Outcasts, so that being the only tech isn't the worst against Outcasts. But yeah, I'm pretty solid putting her here. But yeah, no, you need to know your matchup against her. It's very pub stompy. If you're not prepared for her, you will almost certainly just lose the game. If you are prepared, there's a pretty good chance you can win the game. And that's just where she is at this moment, I believe, and why a lot of people hate her, because if they
I
only
think
play
she's a
against
pub
her
stompy girl.
once
I
a
agree.
month, good lord, if they haven't like repeatedly tried it or even played against it, they're in trouble.
Yeah, you know what the thing is when you go, okay, so we're gonna do a join us tool, and then they look up and they say, what's a join us tool? And then you look back at them and you say, oh,
Yeah,
you sweet summer child, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
they
I'm so
had
sorry
to.
for what's about to happen to you.
Yeah, if they didn't know what they were getting into in higher phase, they either had to super luck out or they lost the game.
Yeah, they lost the game already at that point. Yeah.
So that being said, we're gonna move to Yanlo. Yanlo 1, I am not as big of a fan of anymore. There's no denying that he's still ridiculously strong, but the part of the reasons I kind of stopped playing him after GG0 was just because of the nerfs to Manos and Ryder. And ever since then, I was not like the biggest fan of him because his crew gets kind of resource intensive. There's not a lot of resource gain. You pretty much just have the Chiakis, one draw a card. You have a lot of key TNs you need to hit. But that being said, Treacherous Pass is a pretty amazing ability. Rebuild Corpses is kind of almost not used, but when it is, it can be just game defining. All of his different upgrades are pretty amazing, and can do some pretty good, unique things. All in all, he'll never really be a bad master. I'm just debating whether or not I want to put him into low A or high B, and just because of how amazing his keyword is, and Manos being an absolute monster. Yin can do some great scheme and strat running in GG2. yeah, I feel like I'm gonna lean towards low A with him. He's definitely really solid. He hasn't really changed much. He's always been a good model, decent amount of healing, hard to get off the board. He becomes stat 7 ranged attack, and yeah, he's good. He's just decent, solidly good, and is able to be played in pretty much anything because of how versatile his different upgrades are and how versatile his crew kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, what? He's a defense 3, willpower 4 with 10 health. Pass. No, Yanlo's cool. Like, I don't know. I like him a lot. I think that I mean, we're gonna get to Yanlo too. I think it's very rare that you're gonna be picking Yanlo 1 once you've declared
Yeah.
Yanlo. So that maybe colors it a little bit. But I think there's definitely a limit to how bad he could be. I think that if we're gonna talk in like big broad strokes meta terms, the more aggressive the meta is, the worse for him, because you don't want him to be having to do stuff in the first couple turns of the game. But even then, like turn 2, he's not awful. And starting turn 3, it's just ridiculous. So he has bad matchups. If your opponent pressures you hard enough that like you really need Yanlo to be on turns 1 and 2, he's not, and that sucks. But I mean, he has good activations. Like he has a bonus action that heals. He has a bonus act, or he has an action that he has like a teleport that pushes people around. He can pulse out shielded and push his crew around. Like a bunch of the stuff he does doesn't really depend on what your opponent's doing to be good. It's just stuff that you always want to be doing. So I think you covered the bases. I mean, like if I'm gonna have a downside to him, it's that he does have that kind of slow start issue, which is somewhat unique to him. But it's really only turn 1 that it becomes like a real downside, and then turn 2 he's just like whatever, and starting in turn 3 is insane. So yeah, I have no problem putting him in A. He's also got an extremely good hiring pool. We talked about that with von Schtook. The retainer ancestor is a great hiring keyword.
He's so good that I know a lot of Reser players that don't own his keyword that still are just always hunting for the Manos box because they need Manos and they need Yin, just as like versatiles just to hire.
Yep. Landon, did I
Easy
place him
A.
too low?
No, that's probably about right, honestly. But that's like, so Yanlo is still really good. You can tell that he's really good because they nerfed him 3 times and he's still really good. Like the only reason you probably don't see him now is just because of how good his title is. Like if his title was bad, you would still see people playing Yanlo, and he would still probably be right about this spot. Like great keyword. There's always something good to do on his card. The only bad things you can say about him is that he has like a reasonably high TN burden. But like once you're on turn 3, it's like you need to flip 3s. But like you have to respect that you need to flip 3s to play him. So you have to have like really good resource management skills to actually make the full use of him. It's a big brain master, like Doug said. But I think he's still going to get you all the W's you want if you play him, even post burns, so long as you know how to work around his specific kinks. Like he's really good, and I think he does an okay job of shoring up whatever bad matchups his title might have, if his title even has bad matchups. So yeah, the best master in 10 Thunders is once again just a better in Resers.
And also the back end of A tier with like
Yeah.
7 masters in front of him.
Well, there's a reason.
Laughs
for
in
that, and
Reser.
we're going to get to that on the last one. But Doug, do you have anything you want to close out on this guy?
I think you guys are. I think I personally really don't enjoy playing Yanlo 1 in tournaments because I've found as a newer player that's trying to play really hyper competitive Malifaux, I'm always really close to the edge on finishing my games anyway. And in tournaments, I've sometimes found I only get like 2 or 3 turns or maybe 4 turns, and it's frustrating for sometimes the majority of the game have an underpowered master. So I avoid him in tournament play specifically as a result of that, like live tournament play. But I think it's undeniable how good he is. So I'm not going to say that he's not in A tier because obviously he is. And I think he's right on the back end of the bus there and in perfect position, honestly.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to get into the reason why. Literally,
And the
top
reason is
3
to
models. Yeah, the top 3 models in this tier list are not an S. Is literally just because of this monster. I think if Yanlo 2 didn't exist, I think actually maybe I would leave Kirai out, but Schtook and McMourning would be easy S in my mind. But the fact that Yanlo 2 exists and it's just in my mind the literal best master in the game at the moment, maybe. He's just ridiculous. I guess I'll get into a few reasons why he's ridiculous, but the main ones are going to be the upgrade he hands out to his minions and the ability for him to just place within 3 of anytime those minions are moved, and those minions have laugh off, so you can't even forcibly move them. So what this allows is because those minions also get +2, looking at Komainu and what's the ninja's name? I can't remember it.
Gokudo.
Gokudo. Gokudo.
Because Komainu and Gokudo get both +2 movement, and they become 7 move when attached with an upgrade, and have plus flips, and have armor hard to kill, and then you're slapping laugh off on them. Really means that this master can just appear almost anywhere on the table he wants to be. And that's a pretty strong ability, especially because he has Weary Road. So he can be behind the model, Weary Road at 3, then place 3 in front of it, and then it's just insane. And that's ignoring the fact that he also obeys. So you can now Weary Road the model 3, obey him 7 inches, and then place and do whatever you want. And you still have 2 AP left over. That obey can give him focus. I mean, Gokudo don't need it because they'll already have infinite focus, but, you know, it's nice getting it done the dog, I guess. And that would all be just pretty good for scheme and strat running. Like, that makes him a pretty good master. And then you look at his other abilities, which is, I guess we'll start with Final Wishes, which just allows him to look at the top 5 cards of his deck and discard cards in any order. The only real downside is this is it's non-Joker cards. So unlike Sonya, who can discard your opponent's red Jokers, you get stuck looking at a black Joker and figuring out how you have to use that. Most of the time, it's not terrible because here's a fun little trick for you people, and you should probably remember this. Obey your own model, and then just don't relent to the duel. Just flip the black Joker on your model. So it's not even hard to get rid of on this model as long as you're willing to take an obey action. And then while doing this, he can hand out one of his upgrades, which it's just literally any of the ones hired that game, which can be some pretty amazing upgrades. You have the regen from Manos, you have Ruthless from Izamu if you're hiring him, whatever, and the more likely Terrifying from Yin are normally the big 3 that you'll see. Terrible Wish is also just like perfectly fine. If they have no cards in hand, you can just give Adversary Ancestor. If they have 1 card in hand, you can just make them pretty much have to lose their last card. You don't see that as often. It's literally like probably maybe the worst thing written on his card, and it's still pretty good. Stat 7 Obey. It's the fact that it's built in when targeting a model with a reliquary upgrade is pretty amazing. It also gives the focus then as well. Worst comes to worst, you have to stone to obey an enemy model. Oh no, the horror. It can be pretty ridiculously broken. Or you just saw a high mask on Final Wishes, which happens not infrequently. And then finally, the last thing, the thing that honestly makes this model truly disgusting in my mind is his gun. It is a gun action, but because Weary Road and his own models pretty much makes it so he'll never be engaged. It can always take 3 shots. It ignores armor, ignores incorporeal, which makes the 2-3-4 a lot more enticing because most good
fire.
Yeah, ignores friendly fire. Most good models in the game are, have armor and incorporeal. And and it targets willpower instead of whatever. It's just amazing. But Hole in the World and having Sonic Strike on it is why it breaks the game. Being able to just literally stun almost any model in the game you want, because you can just have to win one duel against them, is just ridiculously strong, as well as being able to stone Hole in the World and place the model 6 within any location. This model's disgusting. Draws 2 cards, does everything, picks up markers. The only bad thing you can say about it is if it picks up half markers to draw cards, then it probably explodes itself because it's move 2. With that, I'll end my spiel. I talk the whole time. It's a monster.
All right, I'm going to review this model in the form of a series of questions. Why is he 6/7 with Incorporeal? Why does he
Yeah,
get to
he's
not
fully
only build
evolved.
in the suit for Obey, but also build in his trigger? Why does his upgrade, in addition to everything else it does, just give him an extra Obey per turn? Why does he generate a scheme marker for his own Clear the Path? Why does Clear the Path exist at all? Why anything about this model? This model is stupid as hell. Like we're doing the Malifaux draft league with the content creators, and I got Resurrectionists on low, and I'm playing him into Jesse.
Jesse's
from-
McCabe.
Yeah,
We're
Jesse's
playing him to
Explorer
Jesse's
Society McCabe.
Oh no.
And
Jesse's
like,
winning that game. I'll have you know.
I'm
I
sure he
want
is.
him to so badly. I talked to him about it at our local. I played Jesse and he schmongled me in round 1. And I was talking to him about it, and I was like, he's like, which one? He's like, which one do you think I was taking? I was like, dude, he's gonna take Yon. He's gonna take Yonlo too. Like, I literally have the crew painted, because we're gonna do that one. We're gonna do that one live for probably a battle report. We're gonna go out there and we're gonna use actual models. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, so at first I was like, oh, but he has the lightsaber and he can hand it out and then he can kill my Komainu. And then I was like, oh, I don't care. I'm just going to stagger his master and then throw him away with Hole in the World, and then I'm just going to kill his whole crew and he won't be able to do anything about it. Like, Yonlo's insane. This model's nuts. I don't know if he's the best master in the game, but that's only because I haven't thought about the question. If I thought about the question, he'd be on the list. Play Yonlo too. Like, what the hell? Why Clear the Path? Why does that ability even exist?
Because Thunders don't have marker removal otherwise.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
The Pope.
Yeah, so the reason why Yonlo has all those things is because Rezzers are a glue sniffing faction and just get to do whatever they want whenever they want to, and it's just absolutely crazy. So to answer your first question, he's 6/7 because he's obviously got all of his upgrades attached in this form and is fully evolved. He has Clear the Path because marker removal doesn't exist in my faction, so the fact that Rezzers gets a little more of it is okay. He's incorporeal because he's already attached that upgrade, obviously. And he gets the built-in suit for his Obey trigger because, all right, I'm losing steam here. I don't know the answer to this one. Because that way we can finally have a model with Breath of Fire that's good. There we go.
What about his gun? Why is his gun so good?
His gun is so good because
Yeah,
if
why does he
Dreamer
get-
was
why does he
allowed
get a
to
gun
have
that
it,
can
then,
be
you
resisted
know,
by
our
either
faction
defense
should
or
be
willpower?
allowed to have it as well. I mean, Dreamer gets 2 of these, right? No, 3 even. So having one of them in your faction is probably okay, right? Very,
Probably
very
it's
okay.
probably fine.
Why
It's also
does it
probably
have
fine.
Stunning Strike on it? Why does
But
it have a
he-
stonable Hole in the World? What?
The real
Who
thing
put
that
the
I
bot
want to
in
get
the bop,
into,
chubop,
as far
chubop,
as
who?
like, if you had all this stuff, it would probably be a fine master, if not for the fact that, you know, most factions pay 11 points for 1 ride with me in a turn, and he just gets an upgrade that lets you ride with me 3 times in a turn, sometimes 4.
He's the world's angriest hot air balloon, dude.
He is
So
the
you just-
only stonable Hole in the World in the game.
Yeah, it's also really good. I don't disagree with that. And it's definitely one of the reasons why he's, you know, actually good. I think with other triggers, Twist Reality would not be good enough to put him into S tier, but he'd still be good. But like, what was I saying? I'm getting too layered into my own irony here.
I mean, I guess do you agree that he's an S tier?
Oh yeah, for sure. I said at the beginning of this video there was only one S tier Rezer, and I'm glad my predictions have proven true as I've convinced all of you.
Well, we had some infighting. I think we all had like another S tier, which is fascinating. And then we had some infighting, and we all kind of conceded some points to one another.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
now we
I don't
just
think
have one S
anybody
tier.
on this video was ever going to make Yonlo 2 anything other than S tier. He's completely berserk.
Yeah, and he literally is the reason why we can actually argue the other masters aren't S tier. It's just how.
Because you're like, are they as fucked up as Grandpa V 2.0? You know, and the answer
Yeah.
is like, no, they're not.
Like,
They're just
part of it
actually
is
not.
also that like we were talking about McMourning and whether or not McMourning's S tier, but McMourning his keyword is like doo-doo, whereas Yonlo's keyword is
Amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
One of the
So,
best
oh
keywords
yeah,
in the
another
game.
point. Sorry, my one big point that I want to make. Wait, sorry, is that the word of the Pope?
I think I probably had something else, but I've forgotten it by this point in time. He's obviously very good.
Why can you take almost infinite actions on this guy? I mean, I haven't really seen it yet, but there is the funny minion list where you just keep on handing off his upgrade, running forward, and then bonus action shooting a model. You just shoot
because
like
that's
20
a meme
models.
and not actually good.
It's
That's
funny
their
though.
answer.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I agree. Trash. Why bother? It wouldn't
Wait,
even.
when
You
did
wouldn't
she
be
get to
playing
D?
a
I
game
thought
of
she was- I thought we
Malifaux.
decided
It
she
wouldn't
was
be
in C.
sporting. So
Did you move her to D for fun?
I moved her to D because Doug
Both the
agreed
No,
with
Resurrectionists
me
she's in
that
agreed
D.
she
with
could
me.
I
actually
acknowledge
make
that.
it to D.
That model's
Okay.
trash. I would never even pick that model up.
The second Doug said
it's not
I'll
even
literally
built.
never play it, I'm like, I'm with you.
I would
All
never
right.
touch this model. I own it. It's not built.
All right, let's close this one out.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. All right. So now I guess we do versatiles. This will be interesting.
Yeah.
Oh shit, yeah, right. Top 3 versatiles. Sloth, Dead Rider, and then Sloth again. I don't know. Like Manos? Lovelace?
You
God,
just said like
this,
5 dude.
This is
you
the
just said, like,
faction
5
that
models.
literally has like the problem is the faction has some of the best versatiles in the game because they're all good situational versatiles. Like Manos just having deny demise is really good. So I guess Manos would probably be number 1, just because Dead Rider got nerfed. So nerf Dead Rider, I'll put 2. And then the last one I hire in some edge cases, depending on the master, is actually Sloth. So I'll go Sloth. Manos, Rider, Sloth is probably legitimately the best 3 out of keyword hires you'll see a lot.
Yeah, I mean the only thing is if I'm gonna be really like scrupulous about this and say I really do mean models with versatile, which I know we're not, we're doing out of keywords too, then it would be Guishin, because like having an incorporeal take the hit is pretty sweet. But yeah, I mean Dead Rider is definitely one, Sloth is definitely one, and Manos is excellent. You see Manos all the time. Yeah, I don't think this one is particularly interesting because like they're so good. Like there's no spicy hot takes about Resur out of keyword hires.
Yeah, Lovelace to counter, Gravity, Vincent if you need exorcism. It's just yeah.
I think the point in general, and I was gonna say this also, I think we all just kind of agree. If you're a Resurs player, you have so many cool toys to play with. Like Anna Lovelace, like that's just a great model. Yin, great model. Manos, great model. Like there's so many things situationally that you can pull from and pull upon that are just nuts.
And thank God, because like 6 of the 8 keywords are literal trash.
Yeah.
No, I don't think
the nurse.
Urami is
Also,
trash.
the nurse. We didn't say, nobody talked about the nurse. She's great.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think Urami's keyword is trash.
Yeah,
Sure. So it's got to be again Manos, Dead Rider, Sloth. I definitely can't include Guishin because I think Guishin, while meta defining, is not good within the meta it creates. I could go into detail on that, but
No, that
only
makes
if you
sense.
guys want.
I'm gonna say Guishin, Dead Rider, and Enslaved Spirit.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, y'all. Make sure if you disagree with us, make comments in the below and tell me why I'm wrong, and I'll tell you why you're wrong, and I'm always right. Besides that, though, definitely check out the Danger Planet. We'll also include links for them. They're starting to create a lot of new good content, and hopefully we'll see more of the creator content games on their channel that they're playing in. Yeah. So check them out. Leave a comment, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Peace.
And that's why you're a Resur.